On traverse la rage, c'est la tentuelle. Comme les raton, les filtres, les ébandants. Des lampées à la cave, des petits blancs. Des barbecues, des paprika et des violents. Qui étudient le sexe avec les animaux enfants. Beaucoup lycées, sans perdre un verre de blanc. Les traceurs pour nos chiffres pour les couleurs. Pour leur salon, bibliothèque de pétrole. Et que sont tous les masques avec leur visage blanc. Vive chacun dans cette vie qui s'annonce. Moi, c'est en quand c'est la faute, car moi, c'est on est direct, et ça se direct, on vous donne des poursuites dans l'air.
Yeah! Bro! You there? What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Logan Blake Show. This is where we discuss how great veganism is and how terrible every other diet is on the planet. Every other diet will kill you. Milkjar, you got to turn everybody's volume up too when they get in.
Hello?
There he is. Hey,
What is going on with the music?
I don't know.
Hello?
Milkjar,
Yeah.
you got to turn everybody's volume up too on the controls thing there, so the audience can hear everybody the same.
Hold on. Does everyone hear everybody? I'm hearing that all the volumes are fine. Everyone, so say something, both of you guys, so we can confirm that everyone is being heard.
Fruit is the best. Meat sucks. Go vegan.
Go vegan, everybody. It's better for you.
Okay, so is everyone being heard fine now, apart from my microphone being shitty? Can everyone understand what I'm saying? Okay, so apparently my screen share isn't working, and I wanted to, be able to share documents on the screen, but I don't know. So everyone is just seeing a cursor now. They don't see like what I'm actually seeing on my screen, apparently.
No.
Yep, it's just a cursor.
We could always link them all afterwards, but yeah.
We can always what?
Link them all afterwards, like in the, comment section, description box, whatever, but screen share is better, obviously.
Does either of your screen shares work?
I don't have screen share. CO does, though. I just have a phone.
Give me 1 second. I'm going to open up the studies that we had. And then I'll try to share my screen, and hopefully you guys can see it. There we go. Screen share.
Oh, there we go.
So you can see it, right?
Yeah. Perfect.
It's looking good.
Okay. Cool. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing though for now, but it works. So, we've got the studies. Whenever you want, I'll just turn it back on, Milkjar, and then we, vice versa. Logan, you too, if you want to quote something from one of these things, then just let me know and I'll share it.
Okay. And
you don't mind if people put this on their channel afterwards, since it didn't work for us to do this?
So how is that going to work? Are you going to download it off of my channel, or are you going to
Yeah, well, I'll just figure it out. We'll do it afterwards.
Are you doing recording the screen now or something, or what's going on?
Yeah, I could do both. It doesn't really matter, but I just have a phone, so I'll just have to figure it out a different way.
Automatically being posted to my channel, or are we just going to lose it when it ends?
No, this will get posted to your channel.
Yeah, you should post this to your channel. Yeah.
It'll happen automatically. When you stop broadcasting, it'll just appear as a video.
All right, so I definitely don't have to worry about that, I guess.
Yeah.
So I'm just looking at the cameraman thing. Is everyone just seeing Conscientious Omnivore on screen now? And they're not seeing me as the main screen while I'm talking? Because I want to just make sure I know how this works for when studies are going.
Yeah, it just shows CO now, so I don't know.
So when we're talking, no one else is being seen? All right.
That's weird. You're sure you're not just seeing a delay, though?
What?
Sure you're not just seeing a delay on the stream? It's
I don't know what I'm seeing, because my YouTube can't show live streams, so I can't look at what everyone's seeing, so I have to ask. I just see my Google Hangouts dashboard.
Okay, I mean, no offense, but then why don't we just stick with what the original plan was, which is that I would host?
No, everything's working fine now.
You're saying that everyone is just seeing me the whole time. I wouldn't
No,
say that
that's
that's
on
fine.
purpose because I'm using the cameraman option so that I know that I can make sure no one else shows up on screen while we're showing studies or something like that. But
Yeah, but just do
everything,
that when he's showing the studies. Don't do it for no reason, right?
yeah. So I guess
Yeah.
we can proceed now. Hold on, I'm trying to turn off the thing where I choose who gets seen. Testing. Yeah, so now I turned on this cameraman thing. I guess I can just manually operate the camera. So, would you like to begin?
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to say, you don't even really have to turn that on because when CO is talking, the studies will be up while he's talking about them, so you'll be able to see them, right?
Well, now it's stuck on me choosing who gets seen, so I can just operate manually when whoever's turn it is to speak begins speaking, and it's probably better that way.
Okay, I'm fine with that.
Okay, so you want to begin?
Sure.
Sure.
So my point is basically for the debate that veganism is an ideology and a philosophy of kind of a way of living. It's not necessarily a diet. There's 1,000,001 ways to be vegan. So it's not necessarily about health for a lot of people. Some people don't care about that at all, in fact. But my point is that you can be and in fact are more likely to be healthy by eating a vegan diet. And specifically, more accurately described, my version of a vegan diet is a whole food plant-based diet. So very little to or none in the way of refined foods, limited kind of like plant oils to a minimum or none at all, and basically just eating like whole unprocessed foods, often raw but not necessarily. So definitely I do eat starches and some grains as well, but basically centered around fruits and veggies and greens and some nuts and seeds and stuff like that. So my point is that diet is natural, is good, is healthy, and it allows you to basically live in a way that aligns your ethics with with your ideals and your day-to-day life. So that's my opening statement.
Okay, so you chose 2 studies to prove that veganism is superior?
Well, again, not veganism necessarily for health, but whole food plant-based, yeah.
So you chose 2 studies that you believe prove that whole foods plant-based veganism is superior for people's health?
Yes.
Okay, so you may begin presenting that evidence.
Okay, sure.
And you can start with dropping the link for everyone in the chat.
Sure, give me 1 second.
So I just got a question before we go on. How is this going to work? Like somebody's just going to read an entire study? Like when it's your turn to read a study, are you just going to go on for 15 minutes while we just sit here? Like, because
I don't know
people
how
need
long
to.
he's going to go on for. He can just use the study and he doesn't have to show it if he doesn't want to. If I want to point something out, I'm going to want to show everyone that what I'm saying is actually in the study. He doesn't have to do that. He can just explain what he thinks in this. He doesn't have to show it. If you want to show everyone on the study.
Yeah. We just don't want it to be super boring for the audience where it's just like going through a study. Like they want to hear actual conversation back and forth, like arguments, right?
He can prove it however he wants, and I can do what I want, and we'll just do it that way.
Okay, so yeah, let me just say the kind of like my general kind of point is that.
Did you drop the link?
Give me 1 second. Oh wait, that's not gonna work. Hold on, because that actually is the local file. Hold on 1 second. Here we go.
Sometimes links don't work unless you're a mod too, so maybe it won't work.
So you can drop it to me and I'll put it in if it doesn't work.
Yeah, it didn't take it. I'm gonna send it to you on Twitter, Milkjar. Okay.
Okay.
So that's the first one. So anyway, basically my point is this, that the majority of our diseases and illnesses now in the world, in the modern world that we live in, don't come from dietary deficiencies. They come from excesses. And my stance is that basically, you know, in the old days, like when people were trying to struggle to find enough food to just eat so they wouldn't starve to death, you know, people were often under eating, and they often did face like, you know, dietary deficiencies, especially people living on the fringes of kind of where humans can inhabit. So, you know, really remote areas, really cold areas, really dry areas, etc. But in our modern day, the problem isn't that people aren't getting enough vitamins or nutrients of some kind, minerals. The problem is that they're getting too much of the stuff that's harmful. And my assertion is that the stuff that's harmful is the animal fats, the animal proteins, and all the chemicals that go with them, due to the kind of like unnatural way that these are acquired nowadays. I will say though too that I know, you know, Milkjar's view is that if the meats were
brother.
Sorry, Milkjar's twin. That I know your view is that, you know, if the animals were in a natural state or wild caught or whatever, just, you know, grass eating, that they wouldn't be unhealthy. But my assertion is that they would.
I think even if you're looking, I think eating factory farmed animals is superior to not eating them at all.
Oh, okay. No, I wasn't saying that you weren't. I'm just saying that you think that those aren't as healthy as eating the wild caught ones, right?
Yeah, but it's far superior to not eating meat at all.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. That's fine. I'm just saying that, like, my argument is that there's a lot of chemicals and harmful toxins that bioaccumulate in animals, regardless of kind of where they're living, but especially so in the factory farmed conditions.
All right. So,
but let me finish my main point here. So the thing is that, you know, my assertion is that they're not, people are not unhealthy because they're not getting enough vitamin A or zinc or whatever, you know, trace mineral or vitamin. The problem with people is that they're getting too much saturated fat, too much cholesterol, and too many calories, and too many processed foods, obviously, as well. So you can throw sugar in there and everything else, like oils. And I think that is what is making people unhealthy. So that's my assertion. And the first kind of point that the first study that I want to share, I'm going to share my screen so everybody can see it, is an analysis of the rarity of colon cancer found in Black Africans versus white Africans. And basically what they have, you know, shown is that Black people in South Africa have like 1/17 the rates of colon cancer that white Africans have. And the thing is, they did a study. I'm going to just make it bigger so hopefully people can see it. They did a study where they took, you know, the white people, the Black people. They did a whole bunch of kinds of things where they analyzed what they were eating. They looked at different theories when they first started studying. They thought that maybe the Black Africans were eating like more fiber, and that was helping to reduce their colon risk. They thought they were getting more vitamins because of the plant foods they were eating would be more nutritious, so that was somehow protecting them. And they did a whole bunch of kinds of, you know, theorizations. But when they actually looked through, what they found was that the Black participants in the study were actually eating worse than the white people from all those categories. So they had less fiber, they had less vitamins, they exercised less, they were more overweight. They basically, you know, seemingly on all these kinds of areas were doing worse than the white people. But when they did cell proliferation studies from the participants, they actually did show that they had lower, you know, chance of getting colon cancer. And when they started looking through the whole thing, the conclusion is right here. The low prevalence of colon cancer in Black Africans cannot be explained by dietary protective factors such as fiber, calcium, vitamins A, C, and folic acid, but may be influenced by the absence of aggressive factors such as excess animal protein and fat, and by differences in colonic bacterial fermentation. So, if you read through this, it's very interesting. They also get into the theories about the sulfuric acid that's developed in the digestion of meat, and that is somehow, kind of an aggressive factor as well, and causes the formation of the colon cancer. But the main points that I want to, hammer in here is that they were getting less of all these vitamins, less of all the, nutrients that are considered to be protective against colon cancer, but they had better chances. And in addition to this, if you look through this study, they also had lower cholesterol levels, and they had they ate. I think it was. Hold on, because I took some notes. Give me 1 second. Yeah, they ate 1/3 of the animal protein and 1/2 of the cholesterol consumed by the white South Africans, and their serum cholesterol levels were 35% lower. That is in the study. I just haven't really found exactly where right now, but anybody is welcome to.
Do control out and find it.
Yeah, I mean, but it is in here, so I don't know. Are you disputing that, or do you really want me to go and find that specific part?
What did you say again?
I was just saying that they had lower cholesterol levels by 35%, and they ate 1/3 of the animal protein and about 1/2 of the cholesterol.
1/3 the animal protein and 1/2 the cholesterol.
Yeah.
Give me a second. Yeah, I really don't understand. Like, if you go to table 2.
I don't know what the heck just happened right now. Oh, here it is. Table 2, table 1, table 2.
It's on the left side.
Yep.
There it is. Okay, so how much lower cholesterol did you say they consumed?
They had roughly 1/2 the cholesterol.
Roughly 1/2. So, can you stay on the table, please?
Sure.
All right, so the whites ate 1.5 units of fish per week, while the blacks ate 1.3. The whites ate 3.8, while the blacks ate 2.8. The blacks actually ate more eggs, and
no, they ate less. They ate less eggs actually. They had 2.3, and the blacks had 3.5.
Yeah, so the blacks ate more eggs. Right?
No, that means they had fewer. They ate 2.3 times in a week eggs, and the black people ate 3.5 times.
Yeah, so who ate more eggs?
The black people. Exactly.
So it doesn't really look like, none of this looks like 1/3 or 1/2. It looks like actually.
Give me 1 second to actually find it, because it is written out. So give me 1 second here.
Because from that table, it doesn't look like that at all.
This is what Logan was saying, that it's going to be kind of boring for people, but that's
right. Fine. They don't have to watch if they don't want.
Fair enough.
So while we're sitting here, are you in favor of chicken eggs, Milkjar? Do you think they're healthy?
Milkjar's twin brother, and
Milkjar's twin brother.
Of course, I'm in favor of chicken eggs.
Okay, so here's the section.
Okay,
sorry, guys. Our analysis confirmed that South African whites consumed a fairly typical westernized diet with an excess of animal protein. So they were getting 77 grams a day in comparison to only 25 grams a day in blacks. So that's for the protein. So if you do the math there, you'll see that that's less than 1/3. 3 times 25 is 75. So they're eating less than 1/3 of the protein. And then it says, and cholesterol, here it is, saturated animal fat, cholesterol 408 versus 211 in the blacks.
Okay.
So anyway, I mean, I'm just saying, like, that's exactly what I'm saying, is that, and that's what these guys said in the conclusion, that basically the things that are protective of these people is not what they thought, because they had assumed that the black people would be eating more vegetation and like getting more vitamin, A and C and all this kind of stuff. And it turned out to not be the case. They were getting less. They were more overweight, did less exercise, but they still had lower rates of cancer.
Colon cancer.
Yes.
Is that all?
Well, it's, that's not the only interesting thing in the study, but that's my main point. They theorized as to what else could be doing it, like what could address or what could be causing it. And one of the things they were saying is that the digestion of meat is causing like a, what do you call it, an acid to build up, which is like aggravating the colon and leading to it. But that's not really the point of the study as to why. They were just finding this like interesting description of what they were eating, and that's the point that I'm trying to make, is that the problems that we see in today's day and age are not caused by not having enough nutrients, because I think that's your main argument, right, Milkjar's twin brother, that like if you don't eat animals, you're going to be deficient. You're going to run out of like whatever minerals and nutrients and vitamins, and that's why you need to keep eating them for good health.
It's that, and it's also the problems with carbohydrates in terms of insulin spikes and things like that, as well as anti-nutrients.
Mm-hmm.
And
so you do realize too, though, that eating meat is also insulinogenic. You do get a blood sugar spike from eating meat. Insulinogenic. You do get a blood sugar spike when eating meat too.
Yeah, it's nothing like, you do not get the type of insulin spike you get from eating fat and protein that you get from eating carbs.
I think that's debatable, because there's lots of people that have shown like these glycemic indexes, and I think it's like if you eat beef, you're like the equivalent of eating like white pasta. Like as far as the insulin spike.
Soda with it.
What's that?
You're drinking a soda with it.
No, it's like a direct comparison of just the food itself.
I'd really like to see a study on that, but let's just stick to the study we have right now.
Okay, I'll link it after.
You can't bring up anything that's relevant, or he needs to see documentation.
We have enough to talk about right now.
Yeah, I agree. Let's talk about this. Yeah, let's talk about this. So what would you say to this study about the colon cancer rate?
Yeah, you picked your studies, and those are the ones we're going to talk about.
That's fine.
Can you go back to the study on your screen? Are you done saying your points?
Yeah, that was my point about that study. Yep.
All right, so can we get it on the screen again?
Sure, no problem. Tell me what section you want to see.
Let's start at the top.
Here, let me just jump. Here we go. Go ahead.
Okay, so first of all, I asked, well, the point of this was to prove that veganism was a superior diet, and I really don't see how you're trying to prove that veganism is a superior diet by using a group of people who ate meat and dairy who are not vegans at all. In order to prove something, you need to actually do experiments on the people that you're trying to prove something about. So to say that you're going to prove that veganism is superior by having by presenting zero data on vegans, you can't prove that veganism is healthier without presenting any data on vegans. That's the first point.
Can we address your points though? Can we respond to your points?
Yeah, we can address them one at a time, I guess.
Okay, so I just wanted to say, like, this study obviously shows that the more animal products you're eating, the crappier your health is. But then our second study has vegans in it.
We'll get to the second study when we get to it. All I'm saying is to prove something. If you want to prove that vegans are healthier, I don't see why you don't use a study that has data on vegans and instead want to use a study that has absolutely no data on vegans. There's plenty of study with data on vegans, and to choose a study that has zero vegans in it is, not too smart in my opinion.
Okay, so let me ask you. Are you do you have any contention against anything that I've said so far about this study or the study itself, or you don't like the design of it, or what's the?
I want to point out some things in the actual study, but I just wanted to start with the fact that you can't prove anything about vegans without presenting data on vegans. You can't prove veganism is healthier by presenting data on people that ate meat and dairy because.
Okay, just so the viewers can kind of know something. I mean, Milkjar's twin brother was very specific in the kind of studies that he was willing to accept and consider. So I had to find kind of a balance of finding what we have an actual study with the full text, and that it's not just the abstract and the conclusion and the basic description. So that does limit it because none of us, I think, have paid access to a lot of these journal subscription things. So
you can't show those online anyways. It's illegal to show the ones that you have to pay for, because then you're giving it out for free.
Yeah, so that's point number one. And point number two is that it is what I said before, that it's not necessarily, my thing isn't that you can't be like really healthy if you eat a small amount of animal products. I think there's lots of evidence, if you look around, that the longest lived populations did just that. So if you look at the Okinawans, you look at the people in the Mediterranean, some of the people in India, et cetera, the longest living people ate primarily plants, and they had just very small amounts of animal products. So my contention is not to show that a whole food plant-based diet is superior to everything else. All I'm saying is that it's at least as healthy as that, and potentially a little bit healthier. But the difference might be between, an Okinawan person living to 96 or whether they live to 97. I don't think it really is that much of a difference. But what I am saying is that it's a lot healthier than people who eat a lot of meat and a lot of animals.
All right, so let me briefly explain to the scientific method. Well, first I want to address your complaint about having a limited selection of studies to choose from because of my request for full text rather than abstracts. There are plenty of full texts you can get that have data on vegan subjects. You could get the full text on the Adventist Health Studies. You could get the full text on the American Dietetics Association study on veganism. You could get the full text for free on the Caldwell-Esselstyn studies that are specifically on vegans. There are tons of full text you can get on vegans. So, I mean, I'm not surprising you with this right now. I told you. I recommend.
Can I get a point in?
Yeah, that's fine.
Can I get a point in on what you're talking about here? So we just showed a study that I'm just talking to we agreed that you would be butting in after the first half with Conscious Omnivore. So let me get through the studies with Conscious Omnivore. Okay, well that's a little unfair. I can't even mention anything. You could just say whatever, and I can't even mention something quickly.
I can mention it after, but
like why do you need to shut me up?
I agreed before.
Let me say one point.
Hold on. We agreed before that you're not even entering before we're done with the studies with Conscious Omnivore.
All right, I'll just write all this stuff down. I'll just write it all down.
That's fine. So the scientific method is important because, for example, if you want to prove that veganism is healthier by using studies that have no data on vegans, that can't be scientific because there could be multiple variables between a non-vegan diet and a vegan's diet without just isolating something like cholesterol that would make the difference. For example, let's say veganism, a diet that includes animal products and includes dairy products is equally healthy or almost as healthy as a meat-based diet or another omnivorous type diet. You could get the results that those two are very similar, and then you could take one thing and say, well, this group of people has lower intake of saturated fats, and vegans also have a lower intake of saturated fats. Therefore, we can transfer our findings on these people to vegans just because they have similar metrics on one point. But that creates a lot of problems and variables. For example, let's say the vegans are getting very little B12, for example. This is just an example. There could be something that vegans are missing that the group in the study isn't missing. And by missing that one nutrient, it can alter the whole course of the study. This is why when you're doing the scientific method, you're supposed to have only one variable.
Yeah. So if I can respond to this, I mean, the point of this debate is not for me to be telling people about like one specific study or one specific experiment. This isn't a question of like where you have like little animals in a lab situation and you take like, some rats and you feed them this and you take the other rats and you feed them that. The point is that my assertion is that you can be absolutely healthy and happy and thriving on a plant-based diet, and your assertion is that you can't. And all I'm trying to say is that there's lots of evidence that shows that people who have lower consumption of animal products have better health. And the things in this study showed that even other things, which I know you often, have complaints about with like the Adventist health study. The reason I didn't bring that one is because you say it doesn't properly take into account the fact that the vegan people are probably more fit and probably, taking care of themselves.
Absolutely not what I said.
But you will claim that that those kinds of studies they took an unhealthy meat eating population and they compared it to a healthy Adventist group.
Well, let's hold it right there. That's absolutely not what I claimed, because the Adventist health study doesn't claim that vegans are healthier.
That's fine. That's fine. I'm not saying anything. But when I'm not saying that hence why I didn't bring that study. Hence why I didn't bring that study. I didn't claim that now.
I have absolutely no problems with the Adventist health study. I think it was a great study. And
but your criticism of it was that the comparisons were being made from people who are Adventists, who don't drink, don't smoke, probably take good care of themselves, because they're interested in from a religious perspective of doing so.
I had no criticisms of it. I opened the study and I said, look, the study says that if you add fish to your diet, which is an animal product, you will be healthier than vegans. So this study proves that veganism is inferior to a diet that includes animal products.
Okay, so you're doing exactly what you accused me of doing now. You're saying that I was making an assertion of like, because these Black Africans were eating less cholesterol, then therefore eating less cholesterol is healthier. You're doing the exact same thing now by saying that because these people were healthier, or quote unquote lived longer, it's not that they were healthier, that they lived longer ultimately, and because they ate fish, that must be because of the fish. You're doing the exact same thing.
No, because it could be a valid point.
It could, sure, it absolutely could, but you're drawing the inference.
Please, no, I'm not doing that. If you use this study to claim that a lower cholesterol diet is superior to a higher cholesterol diet, that would be valid. I'm not saying it's valid, but it could be a valid thing to say, because this study actually contains data on people with a lower cholesterol diet versus people with a higher cholesterol diet. So the fact that this study contains data on higher cholesterol diets versus lower cholesterol diets, you will be able possibly to draw some conclusions on whether or not lower or higher cholesterol is better, because you have the data.
Yep.
But since you do not have any data on vegan diet versus non-vegan diet, you can't draw any conclusions on that because there's no data on it. So please, you can argue that higher cholesterol is worse than lower cholesterol because the data is there, but there's no data on vegans, so you can't argue that. But I really want to move on because it's not my main point with this study.
Okay,
it's
go ahead.
not even close to my main point, so can we pull up the study again?
Sure. Tell me which section to go
to. Let's start with, can you do a Control F for tuberculosis?
There you go.
Okay. So it says, in conclusion, our results support the suggestion that colon cancer risk in westernized populations may be reduced by decreasing the intakes of animal products and increasing the proportion of carbohydrate. General adoption of an African diet should not, however, be advocated, as the diet is deficient in many essential nutrients, which may account for the remarkably high prevalence of squamous cell carcinomas of the esophagus and chronic infections such as tuberculosis in Black people studied. So right here it's saying that the Black people's diet caused a lot of problems such as nutritional deficiencies, squamous cell carcinomas of the esophagus, and chronic infections such as tuberculosis. So this diet does bring a lot of problems with it that the higher animal foods diet of the whites did not have at all. And let me get through all the points. You can write down each point and then answer it after because I want to get through this.
Sure. Yep.
Next one, let's go to the section where it says,
You want me to do a Control F? Help you out?
hold on. I want to find the section I want to discuss.
Do you mind if I make a point then while you're looking for that?
I found it.
Okay.
Let's do a dietary analysis.
Okay.
Household surveys. Food preparation was similar in all the rural Black groups. None of the rural populations had access to electricity, and consequently, food was cooked outside on wood fires. In the wet weather, in the wet weather, fires were made inside on the clay floors of the huts. Most foods were boiled in large cast iron pots, the staple being maize meal, with small portions of meat and vegetables such as cabbage, pumpkin, wild spinach, or beans added as seasoning. Salt and fat was added to taste. Fat was in the form of vegetable cooking oil, lard, or dripping obtained from commercial sources. With the electrification of urban Black settlements and access to liquid and gas fuels, some of the urban households, next page, please.
Yep. Just scroll down.
Had modified their cooking methods, and foods were occasionally fried. Refrigeration was rare. However, the basic diet remained similar. Carbohydrate maize meal was predominant to that taken by the rural populations. In contrast, whites relied almost entirely on electrical power for cooking, consuming a typical Western diet with high intakes of fried and roasted foods. Scroll up a little bit, please.
Yep.
To the top of that page. Oh, so that's the end of that section.
Yeah. Then it goes to this next one, food frequency.
Okay, so here's a big problem with the, well, first of all, looking at that table, it says that the main point of this study was that only 1 in 100,000 Blacks got colon cancer, while 1 in however many whites got colon cancer. Is that correct?
Yeah, they had 17 times the rate.
Okay.
The white people had 17 times more.
So first of all, by looking at this table, you can see that, and other parts of the study, you can see that the Blacks' consumption of animal foods was about half of what the whites had, yet the Yet the rate of cancer was 17 times more, even though the consumption was only double.
No, that's the cholesterol. The animal protein was 1/3. So the Blacks ate less than 1/3 the animal protein,
Okay.
but they had about half of the cholesterol.
Okay, so let's say between 1/3 and 1/2 of the animal products would be,
Yep. Okay.
Okay, anyway, so what's being studied here is colon cancer, and here is, if they want to be scientific, they should look into something very obvious that everyone knows about colon cancer, and it's that colon cancer and, a lot of other cancers in general are eating fried animal foods, like fried at very high temperatures. It's just very commonly accepted that these cancers are caused in large part by what's called heterocyclic amines.
Right.
which is a carcinogen caused by heating animal fat and protein to very high temperatures.
Right.
So all of the meat, almost according to this study, a very large portion of the meat eaten by the whites was fried to a very high temperature, whereas almost no meat that the blacks were eating was fried to very high temperature. So,
right, they were boiling it, and that's also a known. Yeah, so I agree with you. Yeah, it's known that like boiling meat doesn't like create as many of those like harmful chemicals as
boiling meat generally creates 0 heterocyclic amines. It's almost nothing. As soon as you're frying at those temperatures, the amount of heterocyclic amines is insane. And
yeah, but even just putting it on a grill, like just you know, over charcoal or whatever, even that will produce the HCAs.
Yes, but the worst thing you can do to produce heterocyclic amines is to fry the meat. You can't.
That's fine. I mean, yeah, okay.
So it's very. You can even go to cancer.gov and it'll tell you the same thing. Frying meat and producing heterocyclic amines is can quite easily cause colon cancer.
Okay, so I think we've reached a milestone in the debate because we agree. It's cool.
Okay, so why would you claim that it's the higher intake of animal foods that's causing the colon cancer, rather than the fact that only the whites fried their foods when the blacks didn't fry their foods at all? And we know that frying foods causes colon cancer. So doesn't this only prove that the whites were getting colon cancer because they were frying their food, whereas the blacks weren't? I mean, isn't that the most logical conclusion to draw, because that's just what's commonly known? And also considering the fact that this study also points out that blacks have, you know, way more, you know, problems with their health in terms of chronic infections like tuberculosis or squamous cell carcinomas of the esophagus, and the fact that they're pretty much nutrient deficient in every way compared to the white population. So the study itself is saying that the blacks do better in terms of colon cancer, but basically in terms of everything else, they're doing worse. And if we're looking at the colon cancer, why aren't we blaming the thing that everyone knows causes colon cancer, which is heterocyclic amines, which the whites' diet was high in, but the blacks' diet did not have at all?
Well, that's an appeal to possibility. So that's fallacious what you just said. You don't know that 100%.
The question is, why would you say that it's the saturated fat and cholesterol that's causing the colon cancer, when everyone knows that colon cancer is caused by heterocyclic amines? And
no, I could say everybody knows colon cancer is caused by red meat.
So if I can address it, hold on, here it is. So
I'll finish talking, and then you can talk, and you can finish talking. So here is the question, and I'm going to finish saying the question, and then you can answer the question.
Sure.
Why would you assume, based on this study, that the colon cancer is caused by higher intakes of cholesterol and trans fats, when we know that colon cancer is caused by intake of heterocyclic amines? And from this study, we know that the whites had a very large intake of heterocyclic amines, and the blacks had a very low intake of heterocyclic amines. So wouldn't it be logical to say that the heterocyclic amines are what caused the colon cancer?
Okay, are you done with the question?
Yes.
Okay, so the reason being is that they were still eating, like I said, 1/3 the animal protein. So even the amount increased, you know, from the I always forget how to pronounce it, but anyway, the HCAs, the overall amount was less, and the the other point is that in this study right here, they're talking about how much less animal protein and fat that cholesterol that the guys were eating. There it says there is a divergence of view whether it is the animal fat, cholesterol, or protein that is most responsible for the increased risk, as all three have been shown to have carcinogenic properties in experimental studies. So they're saying that all three, so animal fat, cholesterol, and protein, they've all been shown to have carcinogenic properties. And a diet rich in one is usually rich in the others, which makes sense. And then it says, however, the experimental evidence possibly favors fat as the chief mediator through its effects on bile acids and colonic bacteria. Although there is good epidemiological evidence that animal protein, and particularly red meat, is an etiological factor, recent experimental evidence is inconclusive. That means, we don't know yet, but it says the effect may be indirect as meat is a rich source of dietary sulfur, and then through its sulfur amino acid content. Dietary sulfur induces the proliferation of sulfate, reducing bacteria in the colon that in turn produce cytotoxic hydrogen sulfide. This is basically like a really strong, reason that they're supposing might be addressing why they're getting more cancer. It's basically the high sulfur content of meat.
Okay.
And that isn't changed by how you're cooking it.
Can I just point out how he's being fallacious here? Because you're being super fallacious with what you're saying.
Okay, I'm only talking to Okay, I only agreed to let you into this debate if you agreed to let me only talk to Conscientious Omnivore for the first half of the study.
Okay, so I just thought I'd point out how you're being fallacious, but okay, go ahead.
Okay, if you keep breaking the agreement that we had, I'm gonna just kick you out until we're into the second half, because we both agreed to this, and please honor your agreement.
Okay. I don't remember getting that message, but okay, go ahead.
Yeah, you got the message. Both of you did. First of all, every single point you just made, this study gives absolutely no data on it. They're only referencing other studies, but that doesn't really matter. I just want to do a real quick logic lesson with you. Okay, so you're saying that because the reason that this study can prove that cholesterol and trans fats are a cause of the colon cancer in this people is because blacks consume less of these things and they have less colon cancer, and whites consume more of these things and they have more colon cancer. And the logic is that the logic you need to use is, what in this study did they mention that the blacks and the whites have the highest proportion of difference in, whereas because the difference in the blacks' intake of cholesterol and the whites' intake was about half or 1/3 or whatever it is. And but if you look at the blacks versus whites intake of heterocyclic amines, the whites consumed a lot of heterocyclic amines and the blacks consumed almost no heterocyclic amines. And since we know that heterocyclic amines are a major cause of colon cancer, then why are we pointing to one thing when we already know that fried foods are a major cause of colon cancer, and the whites were consuming a ton of it and the blacks were consuming none of it? And then all you have to look at is the fact that the blacks were less healthy in every single other way. They were nutrient deficient in almost every single way. Like if you go to the graph with their nutrient intake, they were nutrient deficient in almost every single way. The study itself says that the chronic infections that the blacks got were way worse, whereas the whites didn't have this problem. The study said that their rate of squamous cell carcinomas was way higher than the whites, and all these other major health issues that the blacks had more than the whites. The only thing they could point to that the blacks were healthier in than the whites was colon cancer. And we know that the whites have a much higher rate of consumption of heterocyclic amines, which everyone knows that causes colon cancer. So if the blacks did worse in every single way except colon cancer, then, and we know that a major cause of colon cancer is heterocyclic amines, and they consumed none of it, and the whites consumed tons of it, then why is our conclusion not that the only thing that the blacks are doing better in, which is the colon cancer, is not to be attributed to the heterocyclic amines?
Well, you'd have to ask the study authors. So I don't know what to tell you exactly. You know, I didn't research, you know, this. I didn't write this research paper.
So what do you think is more logical?
So here's what I'm saying. If you look at why these people were deficient in these kinds of things, it's because they are very poor. They are definitely not getting you know, good quality foods. They're getting what they can afford. And my point in the whole thing that I opened with is that the illnesses of today are caused by the excesses. They're not caused by the deficiencies. Most people watching this video right now are not the poor South African people in this study, like living in, you know, without electricity and cooking their foods over, you know, smoky, you know, wood fires and whatever. You know, the point is that anyone who's watching this debate right now, what you have to realize is that any of your illnesses are not going to be caused by these kinds of things. I mean, the point here is that the excess is, you know, if you want to concede the fact that like eating, you know, the fried or the you know, the barbecued, the grilled, whatever meat, the non-boiled cooked meat is bad for you. I'm happy if that's all we agree on this study. If you know, even they say they don't know exactly what is causing the difference. But what they were surprised by was that it wasn't these protective factors. So, you know, the whole point was that they thought it would be because they were probably eating more vitamin A, C, folic acid, fiber, et cetera. And it turned out that they were eating less, but yet they were still, you know, better off for it from the colon cancer perspective. And my whole point is that basically, if somebody is getting these, you know, nutrients and minerals, as they would be if you're watching this video now, you probably have access to all the foods you need to get all of those vitamins. Then you would get all the other benefits of, you know, the reduced, you know, tuberculosis risk and the esophagus and whatever. And you would also, by eating whole food plants and not eating any of those carcinogenic, you know, fried meats or even the cooked meats, because even the boiled meats or even the boiled meats would have the sulfur, then you'd be better off. And that's my assertion.
All right, let's go on to the next study.
Okay.
Can we just do a question period after each study or no? Because I can't just save the 1,000 things till the end of the thing. Like, let's just talk about each study afterwards. Like, it makes sense.
How long have we been going for so far?
30 minutes?
Yeah.
30 minutes?
Yeah.
All right, go ahead.
I just got a quick couple questions. So, like, from what I'm hearing, you're promoting a diet of mostly plants. Is that what I'm hearing?
No, where did you get that from?
Well, it sounds like, well, what I've heard is that you're saying, you know, in the other debates that you should eat 1 cow a year and a couple goats. But then all of a sudden you're like, well, you just need a little bit of animal products, like a tiny bit of fish or this and that. And you're pointing out the Adventist study, you're pointing out, you know, all these studies where it's just like they added a tiny bit of animal products. And even your whole argument for this whole debate is just you need to add a little bit of animal products. You're not showing anything that has a whole cow and a couple goats.
Okay, you have the studies I presented. We're going to get to that. Right now, I'm only arguing that the studies you're presenting have absolutely no proof that veganism is better.
Yeah, you can avoid the question if you want and just, you know, just deny what you're doing here, but that's what you're doing. Also, you said this study right here is wrong because it had more than one variable. So do your studies have more than one variable?
Which studies?
Both of them that you brought, do they have more than one variable?
I forget what the second study I presented was.
Okay, well, you had one about stomach acid and you had the Western A. Price Foundation. Both of those have a ton of variables. So you're admitting that your studies are wrong. What do you mean? You gave us a book.
Yeah, in the Weston A. Price study, it's basically he went to. Can we just get to those studies when we get to them, please?
You're avoiding it again. Okay, 2 questions in a row you avoided.
When we get to the studies, we're doing one study at a time. Like, let's not.
No, but
ahead.
you just talked about this study being wrong because it has only one more than one variable. So I'm talking about this study compared to your studies.
Yeah, can you bring it up when we read my studies?
All right, I'll just bring it up later. You could think up an answer, but okay. So what you said about frying meat and then about red meat. So you're just appealing to possibility that it is frying meat, and then you're just asserting that everybody knows that. I could say everybody knows red meat causes colon cancer. Then you have to provide a study. I have to provide a study, and we only brought our studies, which you agreed upon. So that point is mute.
Yeah, I didn't show any studies. I mean, you can go to cancer.org right now and see that it's
you could go to the World Health Organization and see it's undisputed that red meat is linked to colon cancer. It's the same thing.
Yeah, and like when we talked about that, I pointed out that it said that, like, you know, it's got like 1 in a million chance of causing it.
Yeah. You said it's inconclusive, but then so does your stomach acidity study. At the end of it, it says it's inconclusive. So that study's mute then because of that point too.
Let's please stay organized, and you can say everything you want to say when we're on the study being discussed. And I just want to stay organized.
All right, go ahead. Next study.
Wait.
Let's finish your next study, and then we'll get to my study.
Milkjar's twin brother. I just have a couple of questions that I want to ask you as kind of like to wrap up this study before we move on. So I want to ask you a couple of things. One is like around, you know, like say, like it did mention that, you know, they were deficient in like various minerals, you know, like and vitamins. So like one of the things they had was like vitamin A. And I'm pretty sure that's something that you think is also really important because it's mentioned a lot in the Weston Price book and stuff like that, right? Like you think vitamin A deficiency is really serious, right?
I mean, I don't really have a lot of research on exactly how serious vitamin A deficiency is.
Okay.
So I can't really comment on that.
So like one of the, you know, good sources of vitamin A that like a lot of people who promote a meat eating diet, they'll say is like, you know, you should be eating like liver, right? Because liver has a lot of vitamin A. So do you eat like cow's liver, you know, or would you, I don't want to make it personal, so don't you yourself, but I'm just saying, like, is the diet that you think is healthy, like, would you say that you should be eating liver? I just want to clarify that, like, for example.
Can we talk about that when we get to Weston A. Price?
Sure. Okay. And then just the last question on this is that do you admit that the reason why the black people had the lower blood serum cholesterol was because they ate less animal products, so like less that they were that they consumed less dietary cholesterol, and that's why they had lower blood serum cholesterol?
Maybe.
But you would dispute that?
I'd say for sure. I need to think about it.
Okay, you can't just avoid every question though. As a debate strategy, you can't just avoid every question. That just means you're conceding to everything that we're saying if you're just avoiding the answers.
Okay, can I answer? Based on this study, all I can gather is that the most likely reason for why they had such disproportionate rates of colon cancer between the whites and the blacks is that the whites consumed tons of heterocyclic amines and the blacks consumed no heterocyclic amines. So this giant gap in colon cancer is most easily attributed to that, especially since the blacks' health was worse in every single other way, and that the colon cancer is linked to heterocyclic amines. That I think that's just the most logical conclusion to draw.
Okay, that's fine. But I wasn't asking about the cancer. I'm saying specifically, like, do you think that their lower blood serum cholesterol levels were a result of them consuming less cholesterol and saturated fat?
I really don't have enough data to argue that right now.
Okay, and then just as a general question, then, do you think that that is true in general? Like, the more saturated fat and cholesterol you eat, the higher it goes in your blood serum.
Yeah, I'd really like to. I think the best thing to do to keep organized is to go over all the studies first, so we can just get that out of the way and then go into the general questions. Because I want to just focus on studies right now, and then we can do.
Seems like you're just avoiding. It seems like you're just avoiding all the answers. But I mean, if you ask us stuff, we're going to answer it. We're not going to be dishonest and say, "Well, I'll talk about it later." I'll tell you right now what I think. But it's just kind of obvious what you're doing.
So at this point, we're either going to only talk about the studies we're presenting and then talk about everything later, or
don't get mad.
Because
don't get
mad about it. Studies. Do you want to go on to the next study now or not?
All right, go to the second study.
Yeah, I'm fine to move on.
You want to do one of your studies next? So we go back and forth?
Yeah, let's do that. Let's do that. Which one do you want me to share?
Well, you only have one other study, right, on the Taiwanese?
No, one of yours. Like, we go back and forth.
Yeah, we'll do one of yours now, Milkjar's twin brother.
All right, let's do Weston A. Price.
Okay, sure. Now, I mean, just for everybody who's not familiar, I mean, it's a whole book, so we'll have the link in there too. You can probably post it because it wouldn't let me post the link, but I'll share it and then everybody can hopefully see it. It's basically
so should I let Conscious Omnivore do this and then I'll just have some things to say at the end of it, or what?
Yeah, just say that once I'm done with Conscious Omnivore, because
I'll go on mute.
First of all, you read the study and you didn't, so I don't really see why there's a.
No, I read a bunch of stuff out of it. So I also read a bunch of stuff that that refuted it.
Let's just keep it organized, please. I'm going to explain now about this study. And then
sure, I've got it.
Go back and forth, and then you can add whatever you want once we're done.
I've got it on the screen, so let me know if you want me to jump to a specific chapter or like a part or whatever.
Yeah, let me get my notes out on this.
Sure.
Okay, so Dr. Weston A. Price, he was the founder, chairman, and chief research officer for the National Dental Association. He wanted to, he spent years in the lab trying to figure out what caused dental decay and physical illness in general in his patients, and he really couldn't figure it out in a lab. So what he decided was to go all around the world in search of people with, perfect dental health and perfect skeletal development. And he hypothesized that vegetarians would be the healthiest. So what he ended up doing was, this was in the 20s, so there were still tons of primitive people all around the world that were living side by side with their with their genetic equals that were living on the foods of modern commerce. So what he did is he went from place to place, and he studied the health of the people that were living on the primitive diets that they lived on for thousands of years, and then he compared that to the health of the people living on the foods of modern commerce. And so the first thing he found was that the people that were subsisting on the modern foods had the same dental decay as all of his patients. And, they also had malformed dental arches, crooked teeth, deformed skulls and skeletal structure. And, he made note of many other degenerative diseases such as tuberculosis, rheumatism, and pneumonia, and others. And the second thing he found was that the groups who still subsisted on their ancestral diets ranged from having almost no incidence of degenerative disease with a very slight amount of cavities and deformity to absolutely no disease and perfect skeletal structure with a complete absence of cavities. The third finding was that all of these groups from the primitive tribes ate a certain amount of raw animal foods, including meat, dairy, and eggs, ranging from a portion of to the entirety of their diets. His fourth finding was that the vibrant health of every single traditional group was miles above their genetic counterparts that were living on the foods of commerce. And he also found noticeable differences between health levels of different tribes that were on their primitive diets, and including those living side by side. So the data showed that the groups which ate no plant foods had no cavities or diseases, and the more plants that were eaten, the more cavities and disease increased, but never nearing the level of the people that were living on the modern diets, the foods of commerce. The groups that ate almost exclusively raw animal foods had basically almost no cavities to absolutely no cavities at all, or disease or deformities in the entire tribe, and showing perfect skeletal and dental development in all specimens. I really want to show the photos of...
Tell me what page and I'll jump to it, or which chapter.
So the first people we could look at is the Kikuyu tribe of Kenya. So maybe do a Control F for Kikuyu.
Can you spell that?
Kikuyu.
Okay, I think you got some right here. Here you go.
Yeah. So this image right here is, well, first of all, the statistics on the Kikuyu that were subsisting on their natural primitive diet. 5.2% of their teeth had cavities. Their diet consisted of sweet potatoes, corn, beans, and some bananas and millet, as well as some meat and milk. So the people that were on this diet, you can see them right here. Well, you can see the two on the bottom. Their teeth look like that because they just grind away portions of their teeth to make them pointy because they think it's cool or something. But yeah, you can see that they have almost perfect skeletal and dental arch development. And it's all the teeth had 5.5% cavities combined. Let's scroll down a bit.
Yep.
Yeah, more of the same, perfect skeletal and dental arch development, almost perfect. Down some more. Oh wait, did you, this is the pygmies now.
Just tell me where to go. Scroll. I went down because you said to go lower.
Yeah, there's a bit lower than that. You can see the examples of people living on the foods of modern commerce. Yeah, there they are. So that's the same exact people, except they've started working for, the white man. They started working for the white man and started eating his foods. And that's what happened. So yeah, the traditional people's diet was mostly sweet potatoes and fruits and vegetables and all that. 5.2% cavity rate. The next group of people we can look at is
if I could just interject for 1 second. I just thought it would be important, if anybody hasn't read this, that you can see here what the white people are eating. They're eating white flour, sugar, polished rice, and canned goods. So I want to basically just state that I think most people would agree that eating these kinds of things is certainly bad for your teeth, and I wouldn't argue with that. So
yeah, absolutely. We'll get to that.
Yep. Go ahead.
So the next group of people, you could do a Control F for the Swiss.
That'll be here, I think, in this chapter. Yep.
So the isolated mountain people of Switzerland, they had a cavity rate of 2.3 to 5.2 caries teeth when living on their traditional diets. Those that lived higher up in the mountains had the rate of 2.3, whereas those that lived lower down in the warmer valleys had the 5.2 rate. The difference in the two people's lifestyles was that, both of them had a diet of mainly raw dairy and some meat and rye bread. And the ones lower down, in addition to that, also had grapes, greens, and potatoes. So this was both of their traditional diets. The ones that didn't have the grapes, greens, and potatoes had a rate of 2.3%, whereas the ones living lower down with the grapes, greens, and potatoes had a rate of about 5.2%. That was the only difference in their diets. Yeah, I mean, we don't really have to even look at the people living on the modernized foods anymore, because, that's not as important. It was just, that was the point of his experiment. But yeah, their butter was extremely important to them. And they even worshipped their butter. They had holidays just for their butter, where they would put their butters in they would have a church where they burned their butter during the springtime and whatnot. Anyway, it was very important to them. The next group of people are the Seminole Indians. Can you wait? Yeah, just show some pictures of the mountain Swiss first.
Sure.
Yeah.
If I could just say this, I mean, I just don't know if you're getting kind of working towards the point, but I wouldn't disagree with any of the things you've said so far. So I'm not sure if you're I mean, these people too, I mean, they started eating like jams and white bread and
that's
sugar and I would totally agree that is terrible for your teeth. So
so we both agree on that, but that's not the point I'm making at all. So if we can just concentrate a little and go over all the data.
Yeah. I just wanted to make it clear that I'm not disagreeing with what you've said so far about
and I'm not saying you're disagreeing, but let me get to the point.
Okay.
So just so everyone knows, right now in terms of primitive people, we are going from the primitive groups with the highest rate of cavities to the primitive group with the lowest rate of cavities. So if you go to the Seminole Indians, they had a cavity rate of 4%. They had a diet of meat as well as corn, beans, and squash. Just because it's interesting, just take a look at, what these people's dental and arch development looked like. 4% compared to the moderns with about 30 to 40% carious teeth. So that's 4% for them. The next group of people is the pygmies.
I think we were there already. That was the bottom part of this.
Yeah, you could just do Control F for pygmies.
Pygmies, here we go.
So the pygmies had a cavity rate of 2.2% of their teeth. Their diet consisted of raw and cooked meat, as well as some fruit. Just to be clear, none of the primitive people at all showed any signs of things such as tuberculosis or rickets or rheumatism or any of that. The main data points I'm going to be using, though, are the cavity rate, because that's what was most meticulously documented in this study. There were no pygmies living on modern foods, so for them, he couldn't compare them. The next group is the primitive isolated Gaelics of the Outer Hebrides Islands, with a cavity rate of 0.7 to 1.3% of teeth. So there they are. We can go down a little. Their diet was consisted of mostly meat and milk with some barley. And
I'm going to have to stop you there. That's actually completely not what the book says. They were mostly eating the barley cakes with fish.
Yeah, it's a 0.7 to 1.3%.
They had virtually no dairy whatsoever. In fact, there's a point in here where he talks about interviewing some woman who had never seen more than a few drops of milk at a time, obviously from breastfeeding.
Yeah, like I said, it was 0.7 to 1.3%. So
yeah, but what I'm saying is, I'm arguing what you said about their diet is wrong. They were eating the barley cakes with fish. They had very little to almost no meat, and they had no dairy.
The ones at 0.7% had more meat and dairy, and the 1.3% ones had more barley. That's why he gave the figure of 0.7 and 1.3%, because it was like two separate groups. So whenever he's giving a rate of two different numbers, it's because there's the same group of primitive people, but the diets are somewhat different. So the 0.7 ones were eating more meat and dairy, and the ones with 1.3% were eating more barley.
I mean, I read this, and I don't think any of these guys, the Gaelic people, were eating the dairy.
I mean,
children of this community were dependent on
some of them had no dairy
and seafoods. I mean, this is like they basically had no dairy because they couldn't even like maintain animals on the island. There was this whole thing where it talked about like the fields being like really poor for like sustaining like the grazing animals and what have you, and that's why they didn't have dairy. They ate a lot of fish, though. I agree there. They ate a lot of fish.
Yeah, a group of people had dairy, and another group of people had no dairy. All of them were eating mostly fish, tons of fish, and a lot of barley too.
Look, there are no dairy animals on that island. Their nutrition is provided by their oat products and fish, and by a very limited amount of vegetable foods. Anyway, I don't want to harp on about it, but like, I just wanted to make it clear that, you know, I mean, here.
Yeah, I guess my notes. My notes are wrong. So let's make a correction. Mostly fish and barley.
And oats.
Yeah, so my notes are wrong.
No worries.
Okay, moving on. So their diet consisted of meat and, oh shit, I'm reading my notes again. So their diet consisted of fish and barley. So what was their cavity rate? 0.7 to 1.3% of teeth. What?
I just said okay.
Yeah, the modernized Gaelics had a cavity rate of 32.4% of teeth. We could look at a comparison.
I think this was
Of,
where the brothers ate the different diet, and like one of them had the traditional diet. He had like the really nice teeth, and the other guy was losing his teeth because he was just eating all the crap sugar stuff.
Yeah. So the next group of people is the primitive Polynesians and Melanesians.
Here's the Polynesians, or do you want me to do the other one first? I don't really care.
Well, they had basically the same everything.
Okay.
So Polynesians and Melanesians. Their cavity rate was 0.42 to 2%. Their diet consisted of meat and coconut with some fruit. The Melanesians, whose rates were lowest at 0.42%, ate the least amount of fruit, while the Polynesians, who ate more fruit, had a higher rate the more they ate. And yeah, we can just take a look at what they looked like on the traditional diets compared to the other diets, skeletal structure, all that, perfect teeth. The next group of people is the Maasai. Their cavity rate was 0.4%, and their diet consisted of only milk and meat for the warrior class, and some fruits and vegetables were allowed for the people who were not in the warrior age anymore, as well as women. Yeah, so that's their pictures. So basically, we're getting into the people who ate basically no plant foods at all at this point. So we're at 4% for that. 0.4%.
Okay. Do you want me to move on to the Inuit, the Eskimos?
No, though they're not next. The next ones are the Forest Indians of northern British Columbia in the Canadian Rocky Mountains. Their cavity rate was 0 to 0.16. These people had absolutely zero plant foods in their diet. They only had the animals they hunted. They ate nothing else. And, that's the disease they got on the modern diets. And so Eskimos had we can go to the Eskimos. They were number one with 0.1%. And they had the least plant foods in their diet, which was about, maybe like a couple weeks where they have some berries. And their diet was also the highest in raw. Their diet was basically almost 100% raw, and they had 0 to 0.1%. They were living in the harshest climate on Earth. If you look at are you at the pictures of the Eskimos?
Yeah, that was just the bottom. They compared a white boy living in Alaska.
Go to the top with the Eskimo pictures.
Yep. Yeah, I've scrolled through it. I don't know if there's one in particular you want, but actually that was the top one.
Yeah, let's go to the first one with the that one. So the woman in the upper left corner, she had 26 kids, no cavities. She only had a broken tooth. So the thing he noticed that really amazed him with the Eskimos was not just that they had no cavities. It's that if you can see the hold on, I think it might be the next image.
Sure.
Oh no, it's this one. You see the one with the really small teeth? Oh, up a little more. The first one we were looking at.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you see how the top woman and the guy in the bottom left and the bottom right have really small teeth? You notice that?
Yeah.
Yeah, so this was the most important thing he found with the Eskimos. They had worn down their teeth to basically stumps because they
they would chew the leather for like the preparation for like drying and whatever.
Yeah, they would use their own teeth to tan their hides, and also they would use their teeth to, chew through like thick bones. So they would, chew like, it wasn't like some chicken bone or something. They would chew on a whale bone every night at dinner, and that wore down their teeth. And the most amazing thing he saw, and he didn't know it was possible, is that as the teeth wore themselves down, they would regenerate a second level of dentin, which he had never seen in his entire life before. For basically, they were regrowing their teeth as they wore them down. So even though half their teeth were gone, there were still absolutely no cavities in their entire mouth. And, their teeth had actually gone down to, where the pulp would be exposed, but then they like reformed around the pulp. So these are like the first people and only people he's ever seen that were able to, completely regrow teeth around their pulp. So basically, the experiment was basically made to show that he wanted people to stop eating modernized foods. His conclusion was that the more modernized foods that people ate, the worse their teeth were. And that he didn't recommend people go on an all-meat diet. His diet recommendations included, lots of plant foods. But the interesting thing that I saw is that the further down you got along to the, so as we saw, the group with the highest rate of cavities out of the primitive tribes was the Kikuyu, and the further along you go down to the less and less plants they're eating, the lower the rate of cavities gets. And it's like a pretty clear progression. And I know my notes were wrong on the dairy thing, that the Gaelics weren't eating dairy, but it's still the same progression in terms of lowest animal foods consumption to highest animal foods consumption in terms of how much cavities and diseases and the quality of their dental and facial skeletal development. So it was clear going down the line. And I left out a bunch of groups for some reason, like the Fulani tribe and stuff, who like ate like basically all liver, and they were fit in the same way, but I didn't want to spend 3 hours going over every single group. But it's just a steady, a clear line of progression.
Yep. Okay. Is that it?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So I'd like to respond to that. I mean, I did agree with mostly everything you said. Like, I don't really have any, thing to argue about what the guy found as far as cavities goes. What I do want to say for anybody who hasn't read this book, I definitely encourage you to take a look at it. It's got interesting things in there, and definitely reads kind of like a fun, book, as well as kind of being informative on certain things. But what I do want to kind of caution people is that when you're looking at something that was written this far back, where the foreword to the book basically calls the primitive people being studied savages, I think that kind of paints a good idea of what kind of mindset, and what kind of date we're talking about. So I think, the other things that I would say is that just because somebody has good teeth doesn't mean that they're in overall good health. Weston Price didn't have a lot of the kind of modern scientific, tools and research, utensils to measure things like for heart disease. Like, we didn't have ultrasounds or angiograms back then or what have you. So even if like the Maasai or any of the groups that ate lots of meat had been studied, I'm convinced that they would have had atherosclerosis and hardening of their arteries and plaques building up and what have you, but you wouldn't be able to see that. The other thing is that a lot of these people did have very short life expectancies. So just the fact that the lady had 26 kids is the perfect example that, why do people have so many kids? It's usually because they have really high infant mortality. And that's actually one of the common critiques of the Price research, is that he didn't take into account the fact that many of these people lived very short lives. So I would say that. And then the other point about the book that I found interesting is, like, you look at the Swiss, for example. They were eating, like you said, a lot of meat. Sorry, not a lot of meat. They only ate meat once a week. The Highland, like mountain Swiss people, but they did eat lots of dairy. So they ate dairy, like tons of dairy. They had lots of milk, lots of cheese, lots of butter, and they ate, I think it was rye bread, and they ate whole rye bread. So they ate basically like bread with tons of dairy, and like once a week they would eat meat. The other group, the Gaelic people, they ate oats and barley, and they ate fish. Now, if we just look at these, and we want to assume kind of like healthy things, what if it was the grain products that were making them healthy? And, I mean, you can, it's just like you said in the first study, Milkjar's twin, that, you have so many variables in a study. It's very difficult to be able to conclusively say what was causing what, and what was causing the good or the bad. Now, I can maintain that in those populations, the good that they were consuming were were the plant products. So were the rye, the oats, the barley, and that's what I would maintain. Now, as far as the populations that ate the highest meat, there are studies that show that those people had some of the worst health. So the Inuit may have had the best teeth, but they had some of the worst life expectancy. And there's actually lots of studies that show that their life expectancy increased when they started adopting a Western diet. And that really says something, because I'm in agreement with you that the Western diet is horrible, but that really goes to show how bad their diet is. The other thing that I want to say about that is that they have found mummies throughout history, throughout different areas of the world, and they have done studies on them and looked and found that even 4,000-year-old mummies and 1,000-year-old mummies, they did have atherosclerosis. They found this among the Inuit. They found this among the people in Egypt. They found this in people in Peru, all these kinds of places. And so it's definitely not something that is new, and it can't be fully blamed on modern, modern type foods. And as far as the dental thing, I mean, I didn't want to be rude and interrupt you, but ultimately, I can just say that all of the things that he found was, because once they started eating the white man's food, it was like they were eating sugar, refined flour, oils, and basically just getting a really crap diet. So I would absolutely agree. You eat sugar and jams and whatever. The Swiss was a good example. They would go down into town and get all these jams and stuff. And you eat freaking jam with your bread, you're gonna get cavities. I would agree with that. So that's kind of the main points that I would have to that.
All right, Milkjar, can you respond? Do you want to respond to that, and then I'll say something? Or
we're gonna get done, and then you can jump in.
Yeah.
So, as far as them having short lives, the Weston A. Price study had no indication of them having short lives. In fact, he said the opposite. We can come back again and discuss any studies you have in terms of them having short lives.
Okay, but here's the thing about the short lives. I mean, what would he have had available to him to show that? I mean,
like I said, there's no data in this study regarding the short lives, so we have nothing in front of us right now to look at that. I'd say that that's absolutely not true, and there's no proof of that. And
Okay,
we can definitely do
I mean,
another live stream where we're
yeah, we can talk about that specifically, but
okay,
here's
I didn't interrupt you, so
sorry.
you can
Go ahead.
make notes and
No, go
then
ahead.
respond.
Yeah, go ahead.
So as far as the short lives go, there's absolutely no proof of that. If you think you have proof that they lived short lives, I would definitely like to go over that. I'd just like to say in regards to the assertion of their short lives, for example, with the Eskimos, the studies they did on their short lives were on the modernized Eskimos who are on welfare and eating, American junk food today. And you might say that's not the case. Let's bring back the studies next week and take a look at the proof you have that they did in fact live short lives. And it's the same goes for the Maasai atherosclerosis. You did submit a study for that, or maybe Logan did before we came, and I said, please submit the full text. And I guess you were never able to find it or something.
Well, that's the thing. You'd have to pay for it,
Yeah.
and that's what
You got to pay for it.
we can't show.
Please let me finish, and then you can address everything. If you really want to discuss that, I'll pay for it, and we'll take a look at it, and I'll host it on my channel, so you don't have to worry about it being illegal or anything, because it's my problem, not yours. I have read the study, and if you actually read the study instead of reading the blurbs, then you'll see that the Maasai that had the atherosclerosis that were being studied, they were getting food aid drops, free food from the white man. And then the question of what if the grains made them healthy? We have enough data from these studies to rule out the grains being what made them healthy, because we have a clear line of progression. If you map out the primitive groups that consumed the most grains to the least grains, I mean, Weston A. Price himself said that you can consume grains and you'll still be, extremely healthy compared to modern people having grains in your diet. So he never claimed that you can't eat some grains and still be, healthy if you still eat other foods. But the data clearly shows the more grains they ate and the more tubers and plants in general, it goes from most plant foods, most cavities. This is just including primitive people only. So primitive people eating the most plant foods had the most cavities, to primitive people eating the least plant foods having the least cavities. So it's a very clear straight line of progression, which is, the more data, if you take one group and another group and compare them, you have a lot of variables, but the more groups you add, it eliminates the variables one by one. This is the reason nobody just does one study and claims they figured something out. This is why people do studies compiling the data from multiple different studies, because as you add each study, you can eliminate each variable one by one. So this is an accepted way to narrow down variables in science, is to just keep adding more data until they're ruled out one by one. And that's what you can do with the data in this book, is that it's just a clear line of more and more variables get eliminated until you can draw a clear progression of least plant foods being eaten to most plant foods being eaten, equaling least cavities to most cavities, as well as, skeletal, facial, and dental development and everything else. Then we have the mummies. I'd like to see what data you have on an Eskimo mummy with atherosclerosis. I haven't seen that. I don't really know what you're talking about, but if we can come back and look at some of those things you mentioned here, including the mummy, then next week or something we could definitely take a look at that. So I just have no idea what you're talking about in regards to lots of other mummies like the Egyptians and the Peruvians and such. Those I am familiar with, and those were people eating basically very little meat. Like the Egyptians were drinking tons of beer, and it's those mummies that I'm familiar with were on diets of little meat and lots of grains. Basically very civilized people who survived from agriculture.
Okay, cool.
Okay, can I make a point now or no? Or you want to go?
Conscious Omnivore can make his point, and then once we're both done, you can jump in.
Okay. I
Cool.
just don't see. I'm not even getting to talk this whole debate. But okay, go ahead.
Yeah, we agreed before the debate started that the studies would be just me and Conscious Omnivore, and now you're
making the whole debate. You're making the whole debate the studies, and you've already read the studies, and I can't even have a say. Like I mean.
All right,
doesn't even make sense.
Look, let me just respond to that. So I think we can do a follow-up debate. I'm happy to do that as well. Just if you want to look up the thing about the mummies, it's called the Horus studies. Horus. Yeah, no problem. I'll send it over. But anyway, if you wanted, or if anybody wants to look it up, it's called the Horus studies, and you can look that up. So anyway, to kind of just finish, replying to your reply. Basically, I'm not suggesting that what he says about the dental cavities and all this kind of stuff is not true. I don't even want to take issue with that. But what you're kind of not looking at is the overall health, like what he could see and determine, and especially based on what he's written in this book, you cannot see that those people had good quality of life or long life or what have you. And none of the things that are the leading killers of the world today, which is like heart disease, diabetes, cancer, are things that he would have been able to ascertain back then. There's a great part in the book where he talks about the Eskimo, and he just says that somebody's it's somebody's assertion that he quotes in the book that says that an average Eskimo man can carry 100 pounds in each hand and 100 pounds in his mouth and walk for a considerable distance. Now, Logan, I think you're in the wrong business when you were doing powerlifting, man. You should have been eating the seals and just the raw whale blubber and stuff, because it would have given you massive strength. I mean, this kind of assertion, I think, is just ridiculous. And the book is kind of filled with this kind of stuff. It reads great. It's almost like this novel. But I mean, it's more akin to a storybook than an actual scientific research paper. If you're a dentist and all you're focused on is just the number of cavities and you're not looking at anything else really, it's like if you're a carpenter and your tool is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So his solution to things was okay, just lower calories equals better health. And I certainly don't think that can be proven from this book.
Yeah, like I said, the data I'm discussing right now is because the point of the study, there was only one point in the study, and that was to prove that the foods of modern commerce are causing everyone's health problems, which is not what I'm discussing here. I'm trying to use his data to map out, all the data he got on primitive people who are all eating foods that were all natural. Everyone was eating natural foods in regards to the primitive people. And I'm just mapping out his data points and organizing the groups of people from those who ate least meat to those who ate the most meat, and taking every point of data he has, which is everything from measuring quality of skeletal and dental development, as well as measuring the incidence of every disease he was able to measure for, which was things such as tuberculosis, rickets, rheumatism, everything he knew about back then he measured for. So as far as everything he could measure for goes, and all the data that he had available, you can map it from, like I said, most consumption of animal foods to least consumption of animal foods, and all the food is natural. There's no chemicals in any of these people's diets. And as far as the the data is very clear. Those who ate the most animal foods had the least health problems for anything he could measure for, and the ones that ate the least had the ones who ate the least animal foods had the most problems that he can measure for. So obviously he couldn't measure for everything that we can measure for today, but just based on the data he gave us, it's a very clear line of progression. And this isn't just a dental study. This is an anthropological study. So to mention things such as a man carrying 100 pounds in each hand is quite normal, and it's normal to mention those things in an anthropological study. And you could see things like that happening in in lots of documentaries. Like, there's lots of things we thought were absurd about anthropological studies on the Eskimos that now we know are true. Like, for example, the fact that they hunt whales out in the cold. They don't even wear gloves. They're just like hunting them with spears, whereas like a normal person would get frostbite after like a couple hours, and they're out there all day without gloves. So there's lots of things that when we just had writings seemed absurd, but then we got video and it was actually confirmed.
Okay. All right. So listen, just in the interest of time too, because it is getting on, I think, close to maybe 2 hours or whatever, right? At least an hour and a half. I would kind of want to like shift gears, and obviously Logan's antsy to get into. I'm even happy to not go over the second study I've sent. And if you want, we can go to your second study, just because I do want to get to kind of some other points as well, just in general and not study related. If you're okay with that. I don't know if you want, we can do your second study. What's that?
I'd like to go over your second study.
Okay. Then I'll let you say what you want to say about it.
I'm done, so if Logan wants to jump in.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so yeah, I mean, like I'm not going to talk like a long time. I just want to get right to the points. I think it's a lot faster if we do that. So do you think primitive people live longer than modern day people?
Yeah.
You think like cavemen live longer than people now, in general, on average?
If they weren't murdered, yeah.
If they weren't murdered. Okay. Well,
if they didn't starve to death.
Okay. Are you just guessing that, or?
No, I have. There's really. I'd like to just go over all that. I mean, I guess we agreed to go over this topic next week or something. Okay. I really don't want.
Okay, we'll move on.
Something like this without evidence.
Okay, next point. So, yeah, you said mummies probably got atherosclerosis because of beer. You mentioned. Well, Inuits drank alcohol like crazy, so I don't know why you would say beer is probably the cause of atherosclerosis when Inuits drank alcohol, like red type of wine, all the time. Which actually helped. I mean, this isn't a study that I brought, but it actually helped their atherosclerosis because it thinned their blood, and they probably would have died earlier if they weren't drinking the red wine. But there's in the book that you have, right? You're talking about variables, and you need to have all these references, right? So then it eliminates variables. Obviously, there's more than one variable in this book, and I doubt you would disagree with that. So that's the point that you brought up earlier, saying that's what makes a study bad, is it has more than one variable. So obviously this book has more than one variable, but the resources, it has 200 resources, but 186 of them are articles from the Western A. Price Foundation. There's only like 14 peer-reviewed studies through the whole thing. Now, if you look at hold on.
Weston A. Price Foundation when the book was written. So
okay, so this is a book called, well, it's a book called Nourishing Whatever that involves this book. Do you know what I'm talking about? Okay, Nourishing Whatever.
Why are we talking about another book?
Well, isn't that the book that has this as a reference?
Yeah, why are we talking about books that reference this? That's irrelevant.
Okay, so, but there's only 14. Yeah. So how many peer-reviewed studies are actually in your book? That's my question. How many peer-reviewed studies are actually part of your book?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I didn't check that.
14. 14. That's nothing. That's absolutely nothing. If you look at a book nowadays with, say, Dr. Furman's Eat to Live book, there is 1,000 medical references of peer-reviewed medical journals. And that's what you need nowadays to be held up as standards for the modern day. You can't have a book from almost 100 years ago with 14 peer-reviewed studies and say that that's sufficient.
Just let me know when you're done.
Okay, well, I thought you might want to respond to that, but okay. So if we're talking about what gives you cavities. Okay, so if we're talking about what gives you cavities, right? If I was to go pick unripe fruit off a tree, it's acidic and it'll give me cavities. But in a survival situation, I would do that. That's nature's way of saying don't eat unripe fruit, wait until it's ready. So obviously you can't tell if people were eating unripe fruit. So to blame fruit as a whole for cavities doesn't make sense, because your argument is if you're not eating your natural diet, then it'll give you cavities. So if you're eating unripe fruit, it will also give you cavities, which shouldn't be part of your diet. If you're looking at people who promote the Weston A. Price Foundation nowadays, we got Dr. Mercola, right? He's one of them. He's against grains, right? Everybody would agree that grains are kind of new. But Dr. Mercola's work in the Weston A. Price Foundation, he promotes vegetables, fruit, beans, raw seeds, and nuts, and says his work shows that they correlate with a longer and better quality of life. The person before him in the Weston A. Price Foundation was Stephen Barnes, and he followed the same research. He died of a stroke at the age of 45. I mean, you could respond to that. That's fine. Go ahead.
Okay, so the first thing you brought up was that the Inuit drank alcohol. The primitive Inuit did not drink any alcohol. You said they drank red wine. Like, where did primitive Inuits get red wine?
Okay, so I do have it. There's obviously all different types of Inuits. So I do have, I mean, I can't go through it because you said I can't even talk about other studies. But after this is posted, I will put whatever's.
Just tell me, where do you think primitive Inuits got red wine?
Okay, like I just said, not all Inuits had the exact same diet. So a lot of Inuits, they ate the same type of foods, right? So the ones that did drink red wines, I do have studies for, and it showed it thinned their blood.
Can you please calm yourself? If there was a primitive
vegan energy, man. Vegan energy. You got to eat your fruits and vegetables. Your brain works faster. You got glucose running through here. That's why you talk so slow, man. There's no glucose, no carbs. Go ahead. I mean,
Conscious Omnivore doesn't have the same problem as you, so.
Well, I'm young.
Please, can you try to be a little more calm? It's like hard to talk to you.
Sorry, man. I'm excited.
Can you please answer the question? Answer the question. If a primitive Inuit drank red wine, where did he get it?
Well, I'll talk about that in the next two studies that we bring up. I'm just kidding.
No, just give me an example. I just want to hear where did they get red wine?
I don't know. Like I don't have the study in front of me, but there is studies that show Inuits drank red wine.
Maybe it was made from the berries. I know they do collect berries. I would just assume it was probably made from some berries they would collect. I don't know anything about this either, but I would just guess that. I mean, I don't know.
You even mentioned they had berries, so there you go.
Yeah, you don't make red wine from berries.
You can. You can make like blueberry wine or like I don't know, all sorts of like.
Yeah, it's kind of an irrelevant point, anyways.
What was your point with the red wine? Is that the reason
I just know that there's studies
because they drank red wine?
No, I just know that there's studies that show that Inuits did drink red wine as well, and it did help them from not dying as soon, even though they still died earlier. They didn't die as soon. You were just using beer as an excuse. that made mummies have atherosclerosis, which is dumb.
Okay, let's save that for when we have some references we can talk about. As far as the variables go in what I'm discussing, like I said, when you're comparing one group of people to another group of people, there's a lot of variables. The reason that people do multiple studies on the same thing is to eliminate different variables one by one. That's why they have studies compiling the evidence of hundreds of studies. So it's perfectly accepted in science. So it's perfectly accepted in science to keep adding different data points and eliminating variables one by one until you can draw a clear progression of one variable that's affecting everything every single time in each study. And like I said, they have all these different data points where they can, we can clearly map out the primitive people who ate the least amount of plant foods to those who ate the most amount of plant foods, and map it out from least amount of dental decay to most amount of dental decay. So it's just a process of eliminating variables with multiple studies. You were asking... No, please, I'm going to finish and then you can talk.
Yeah, I thought you were done. Go ahead.
As far as how many peer-reviewed studies does the Nutrition and Physical Degeneration cite? I mean, Nutrition and Physical Degeneration is its own study. It's not a study on studies. He wasn't looking to draw any conclusions based on any data anyone else gathered. His only interest was to draw conclusions on his own data. So he wasn't interested in drawing conclusions from other people's studies. You were talking about the reason that everyone got cavities on the higher plant food diets was because they were eating acidic, unripe fruit. That's just something you made up. I mean, it's hard to even discuss because you just made it up. Then you started going on some rant about how the Weston A. Price Foundation is against grains now. I'm not interested in discussing the Weston A. Price Foundation right now. I was interested in discussing this particular study. And then you started talking about how Mercola says eating plants is better. Like, I'm not interested in discussing what Mercola says. I'm trying to discuss a particular study. Stephen Barnes died of whatever. I mean, I don't know anything about that. Like I said, that's anecdotal evidence. I'm not interested in discussing anecdotal evidence. If you want to discuss anecdotal evidence, we can discuss how the president of the American Vegan Association died of a heart attack. There's plenty of anecdotal evidence everywhere. I mean, there's no point in discussing these things in a scientific debate. That's about all.
All right. So I gave you a lot of credit, and I said it was 14 peer-reviewed studies, and you just said, okay, it's one. So I mean, now it's just one study. So I mean, I was giving you more credit than you deserved, I guess.
Like, who has more studies? Like, we're discussing.
No. I was saying that you had a lot of peer-reviewed research, but then you're just going by this one study, I guess. So I guess you don't. And also,
I submitted one study. I submitted two studies, and you submitted two studies, and we're just going over those studies.
So can this study ever be duplicated? Can you duplicate your study? No, you can't. I mean, you can't. So nobody could even check it. Nobody could even check it to make sure it's legit, because you can't even duplicate it.
On the same thing. They weren't trying to duplicate it.
Okay.
There's studies on several different aspects that were discussed in this study.
All right. So, I mean, yeah, I couldn't show you the Messiah study. But again, the diet you promote has nothing to do with anything that you're showing. So you're saying to us that, oh, this isn't perfect veganism in this first study. This isn't one cow and a couple goats either. So, I mean,
Well,
for the same reasons you say ours isn't good is yours isn't good.
No, the study includes data on thousands of people who ate anything from no plants to very little plants. So it does include the data on the people I'm discussing. So if I want to claim, hold on, please calm yourself. So if I want to present a study and show that if I want to present a study to prove that a diet that excludes plant foods is healthier than a diet that includes plant foods, I would want to show data on people that didn't eat plant foods. And I did that. And comparing it to what you did, I'm saying if you want to show a study that proves vegans are healthier in some way, you would want your data to include vegans. So it's perfectly valid for me to make the claims I'm making because my data includes the people I'm trying to make claims about. But if your data doesn't include the people you're trying to make claims about, then you can't really prove anything.
So even you would say all meat isn't created equal, I'm sure, right? They're not all the exact same thing and they all are, you know, perfectly healthy for your body and do the exact same thing. So you can't just be like, well, these people ate whale blubber, so therefore one cow is good. And also you're saying that, oh, these ones that showed that they ate a lot of meat, therefore they're healthy. But for some reason, we can't show you a study where these people ate a lot of vegetables and the more vegetables that they ate, they were healthier. That doesn't count. But you're just random weird meat diets prove that your cow goat diet is healthy.
Yeah, I mean, your logic, it doesn't make sense. I mean, you said everything you have to say. I said everything I have to say. So I guess we can move on.
I would like to move on.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I want to get back to something that I asked you before, and I'm hoping you can answer now. Do you agree with the statement that eating dietary saturated fat and cholesterol raises your blood serum cholesterol?
I mean, I don't agree with it, but I don't have any studies I could present to you right now on that topic. So.
Okay. No, I just wanted to know kind of where you stand on that. So, would you say that your view on it is that having too high a blood serum cholesterol level is not bad for you? Is that what you would say? Like, is there a level at which point you would say it's bad for you?
I'd say there's absolutely no proof that heightened cholesterol is any indication of heart disease or anything like that. I've discussed that before. I mean, we can do that one another time.
Yeah, sure. That's fine. I just wanted to know where you stand because, like, I kind of want to make a closing statement on the study part before we kind of move on. If we do move on, all I'm saying is that, like, so regardless of what you think about whether or not having high cholesterol is good for you or not, would you at least agree that that eating saturated fat and cholesterol raises your cholesterol?
No.
No. Okay. So, I mean, the first study, I think, is counter to what you just said, though, because the black people were eating less cholesterol and less saturated fat, and they did have lower blood serum cholesterol than the white people. So, you know, you'll probably say, okay, well, maybe it's because of the HCAs or something else. I don't know. But so you disagree with that. But I think just for the viewers, I want to hammer home the point that I believe that the more saturated fat and cholesterol you eat, the higher your blood serum cholesterol goes. So I would state that as a fact. I think we can talk about that in some other, debate and follow up. And then the next point I would make on that is that having a high blood serum cholesterol level is a risk factor and in fact a necessary thing to get the atherosclerotic plaques to build up and to cause heart disease. So, and I think the last point on the health thing is that unfortunately, that stuff takes decades for it to actually progress to the point that it's a problem. And many of those kinds of problems wouldn't be evident by the type of research that Weston Price did because he wouldn't have had the tools to measure for that. So that's where I would sum up my health points.
Yeah, as far as the cholesterol stuff goes, I'd say you have no proof of that. And I'd like to look at what you think is proof of that. And as far as what you said about he couldn't measure for heart disease or anything like that, I would just say that it has nothing to do with the validity of what he did find.
Oh, I don't dispute the validity of what he found. Let's make that clear. I'm not saying that anything you said about what he said about the dental arches, the skeletal, I didn't say anything about that. So we're in agreement. Like, they had less cavities. I wouldn't argue that.
And no deformity and no infectious diseases.
Yep, I would even say that. Like, I got no problem.
He had nothing that he could measure for, and everything he could measure for, they had less and less of the less plant foods they ate.
Okay, I would agree with that, but the only thing that I would add to that is that, you know, you're talking about like almost splitting hairs. You're talking about somebody who gets like 2% cavities versus somebody who gets 1% or 0.5%. Compared to the Western diet, it's like, you know, that's like the 98% of the problem. So like, and what is that caused by? We agree that it's caused by the sugar, the refined flour, the oils, and blah, blah, blah.
We're talking about 0 cavities at one end and 5% cavities at the other end, and a very clear progression. But let's just please move on.
Yep.
I think we've said everything we have to say.
Okay, cool. So I would like to say a couple things real quick on kind of the diet that you're recommending for health.
Can we just do the studies? I want to just get done with these studies already.
Oh, I said in the interest of time, I'm happy to just skip the rest. Like,
I don't want to skip the rest because there's some very important problems with the next study you presented that I'd like to point out.
Okay, I'll let you point it out. Go ahead. Here, I'll share my screen. Was this one. So let me know if you want to go to a specific spot.
I mean, can you just briefly summarize?
Oh, yeah, sure. So basically, I mean, it looked at a population in Taiwan, and they looked at people who were omnivorous, and you know, and then they looked at people who were vegetarian.
But can you drop a link?
Oh, yeah. I mean, you would probably have had this, but let me just send it to you.
Yeah, I don't want to scroll through everything.
Yeah, sure. I just sent it to your Twitter. Okay, so while you're bringing that up, but basically what they found, I mean, is that you know, vegetarian diets had higher intakes of carbohydrates, fiber, calcium, magnesium, total and non-heme iron, so they were higher in iron, folate, vitamin A, and lower intakes of saturated fat, cholesterol, and vitamin B12, which makes sense, obviously. And then they basically said that, here's the conclusion, we found a strong protective association between Taiwanese vegetarian diet and diabetes/IGF. IGF is the insulin growth factor, which is, it said after controlling for various potential confounders and risk factors. So basically what they're saying is that it's protective against diabetes and insulin growth factor, which is like a cancer promoting hormone, a growth hormone.
Okay, so let's go over the few issues I have. Well, first of all, let's state what was the difference in cancer rates. It was like 2% diabetes rates was like 2%. It was like 2% versus 7% when you average everyone together, which is the premenopausal woman, the menopausal woman, and the men. So when you bring everything together, the vegetarian group had 2%, and the non-vegetarian group had 7%. So
where are you seeing that? Sorry, because I mean, right here, it's broken out by the groups.
What?
It's broken out by the groups. I'm not sure where you're getting the 7%.
Yeah, I did it. I added everything up and averaged it myself to get the total average.
Did you do it by the number of people in the study?
Yeah, I went to table 1 and I just, I did all the math.
Okay, I'm opening it up now, just so it's on the screen.
Because they didn't actually tell you the final number, so I had to do it myself. So it ended up with 2% versus 7%. So about a 3% difference between the two groups.
You said 2 and 7?
Yeah.
That's
5% difference.
Yeah, sorry.
The main problem I have with this table is like there's lots of important things they're not telling us for some reason that I wish they'd tell us, and it would tell us a lot about the problem. For example, if you go to the category of men with diabetes, you end up with the vegetarians had 13%. Well, you look at the family history of diabetes, you see that 58% of the total men with diabetes had a family history of diabetes. And then you go down to how many of the men with diabetes were vegetarian and how many of them were omnivore. You get a, what's it called? A 13% of the people with diabetes were vegetarian and 87% were omnivore. So let's say that every single one of the vegetarians had who with diabetes had a family history of heart disease. That means out of the 87% of omnivores that got diabetes, that means that 45% of them, of the omnivores, had a family history. So why aren't they telling us how many of the omnivores that got diabetes had a family history of diabetes, and how many of the vegetarians that got diabetes had a history of diabetes? At the very least, half of the omnivores that got diabetes had a family history of diabetes, and 13% had a, had no family, even if all of the vegetarians had a family history of diabetes. And there's lots of things here where they're just not giving us the data. So, for example, I have to do the math myself to find out the final numbers for everything. But here's the main issue with this study is, also the study was done by the Tzu Chi Buddhist Center. And if you drink or you smoke if you smoke or you drink alcohol and you are a Tzu Chi commissioner, you will be automatically kicked out of the Tzu Chi commission. So and the study, everyone in the study was a Tzu Chi commissioner. So you're getting people who work for the Tzu Chi commission doing studies on other Tzu Chi commissioners, and they're asking them if you've smoked or drank in the past 6 months or something. And basically, if you're in the study and you're a Tzu Chi commissioner being studied, and you know that if you smoke or drink alcohol, you're going to lose your job, then why would you tell them that you smoke or drank? So it's like a very clear, like, according to this, no one smokes or drinks right now. But like, if you were there and you were being asked, you would be like, if I told them right now, then I would be kicked out, because, so like, why would I tell them if I was doing this and then, be fired? Because the people asking you these questions are, people working for your boss. That's not the main problem with this study, though. The main problem is, let's go to table 3. Okay, so we have omnivores and vegetarians here. Let's take a look. It tells you exactly how many grams of meat the omnivores ate per day. So let me see. Can you scroll down to where it says fresh meat in grams?
Here we go.
Can you highlight that line?
Sure.
All right, so the first number is the 0. That's how many grams of meat the premenopausal woman vegetarians ate. The premenopausal woman omnivores ate 11 grams of meat a day. Then 0 grams a day for menopausal vegetarians, and 7 grams a day for what's it called? For
diabetic men.
No, not diabetic. For menopausal woman omnivores, they ate 7 grams a day,
Yep.
and then
7.49.
and then 0 for male vegetarians, and 7.49 grams of meat a day for male omnivores. So if you average this out for the omnivores, you get that they eat about 9 grams of meat a day on average. So if you calculate how much meat they eat per year, so that's 9 grams times 365 divided by, so you get, they eat 3,285 grams of meat per year on average. So you divide that by 1,000. So you get, they're eating 3 kilograms of meat a year, which is about 6 pounds. So
it's very little meat.
Yeah, so basically what's being claimed here is that the people who eat meat are getting diabetes from eating a half a pound of meat per month. That's like half a pound of, that's about half a pound of steak per month. And like, I can point out how that's ridiculous. I mean, if we take all of these people as a group and do, so first of all, I mean, I don't know how you even call these people, you know, meat eaters. Like, if you use the criteria that the Adventist Health Study used, like, I think this, like, they might not even qualify as meat eaters, because, I mean, like, this is like no meat at all. So basically they're claiming that eating a half pound of meat a month will cause diabetes. And if you just average the entire group together, you get that these Buddhists have a diabetes rate of about 4.5% if you average them together. So it's strange, like, that they say eating half a pound of meat per month can give you diabetes. So, like, let's compare that to like, which country eats the most meat on Earth?
You're asking me, or you're gonna, like,
Yeah.
is it a rhetorical question? I
No,
don't know. I mean, I don't know. I would assume probably some Western country.
Yeah, it's Luxembourg.
Okay.
And I forget exactly what the rate of diabetes is. Let me check.
So we're looking at other studies now?
Yeah.
It's just a statistic. It's not really, it's just a fact, like how many people in Luxembourg have diabetes.
Okay, but
So
again, like you said before, like, you're confounding like things from one study to another. Like, you can, you know, maybe they'll have higher or lower statistics for diabetes. The reason why we submitted this study, just for everybody to be clear, is that the two groups being studied are, like you just said, one of them is eating an incredibly small amount of meat, where in most places they would probably be almost considered like flexitarians or something like that, where they just eat meat very rarely or occasionally. But even there was a significant, in the sense that it was statistically significant, but it was, as you're trying to make in your first point, that it was a mild difference, that it was only a very little difference between, their diabetes rates. But that's exactly the point of this study, that even a very small difference in the meat consumption still has an effect on the diabetes rate. That's the exact point of this study.
So how come a group of people that eat a half pound, so if a group of people that eats a half pound of meat every month, if meat causes diabetes, then why does a group that eats more meat than they eat in a month, people in Luxembourg, they eat as much meat as
and what's their diabetes rate? Okay, but what's their diabetes rate?
I think it's like 2%. You kind of cut me off.
I would be shocked if it was that low.
You're also bringing up other studies trying to debunk this study, right? And you're supposed to be just talking about this study. So what is wrong with this study?
You don't do a study to find out, no one debates how many people in Luxembourg have diabetes. It's just a fact.
Let's just do this right now. Diabetes rates in Luxembourg.
So then I should be able to look up how many Maasai have atherosclerosis and use that as a fact.
The question is, what were the people in the Maasai tribe eating? And we have to look at the data.
So here's Luxembourg. 2% of the people died from diabetes. Prevalence of diabetes is 8% among males, 5% among females, and 6.8% so for the total. So this is exactly in line with our argument. They eat more meat, they get more diabetes.
So you said how much for females? How many females have diabetes?
Look at my screen. I'm sharing it.
Oh, sorry. I was looking at my
No worries. This is just from the World Health Organization, diabetes by country. It's showing, here, let me zoom in here. Proportional mortality. It says 2% died from diabetes. But if you look at prevalence of diabetes, 8% of males, 5% of females, and 6.8% for total, which is higher than what you just saw in the Taiwanese.
Okay, so they have a, what's it called? A 2% higher rate of diabetes, even though they eat as much meat in a day as those people eat in 2 months.
Yeah. So, what's your point? you're
debunking yourself here.
They're getting more diabetes.
I just want to get this clear. So your logic is that eating 11 grams of meat a day will give you about 6 to 7% rate of diabetes if you eat 11 grams a day. And that means, hold on, I just got a text and it threw me off. Let me start over. The logic of this study is that if you eat 11 grams of meat a day, that will give you about a 6 to 7% rate of diabetes in people who eat 11 grams of meat a day. And that means that meat eating causes the diabetes. But also you have a group of people that eat 500 grams of meat a day, which is about 50 times more, and they have the same rate. Is that strange to you at all?
No, they don't have the same rate. They have a higher rate. And the point isn't to compare the Taiwanese to the people in Luxembourg. The point of the study, that the reason why we brought it, was to show that even in the same group with the same genetic, same regional group of people, that even the people who ate just a little bit were still adversely affected by it. And you can't compare them. We literally looked up like you're talking about science and whatever. We just looked up some statistics for another country. We have no idea what other confounding factors play into this. But even this is at the very least still supporting what we're saying. They eat more meat, they have more diabetes. Now
They don't have more diabetes. They have the same rate.
no, they have 6.8.
Yeah, and how much diabetes did the
You just said it was 4. You said it was 4.
4 is the average of everyone.
This is the average of everyone, 6.8.
No, that's the average of men and women. If you average vegetarians and omnivores in the Taiwanese, you get 4. If you do just omnivores, you get...
You're missing the point here. We're not talking about Luxembourg. I didn't bring Luxembourg. You brought it. And you're the one who wants to stick to the studies that we brought.
Something here. If you average the rate of all the people in the Taiwanese study who got diabetes, their average rate for vegetarians was 2%. The average rate for meat eaters, who apparently are meat eaters, even though they only eat a half pound a month, their average rate is 7%, which is actually higher than the people in Luxembourg who eat 50 times more meat than they do.
Yeah.
So, we don't know the variables in the Luxembourg study. The study isn't in front of us. We can't see the rest of what Luxembourg people ate. And the only other argument you made was about the smoking and drinking and didn't tell their boss. And that's just an appeal to possibility again and is totally fallacious.
Yeah, we also don't know what the other people in Luxembourg eat. So just because the average has this rate, and just because you're claiming that they are the highest consumers of meat, that still doesn't mean that on average, all the people eat that much meat. We might see this low rate because of other, healthy things they're doing, or because maybe there's a bunch of vegans there. I don't know. And it's pointless to compare it to Luxembourg. The point of the study is that within that same group of people, the people who ate less meat got less diabetes.
Okay, so let's just quickly recap. You're claiming that meat causes diabetes when the Taiwanese who ate 11 grams of meat a day. So even though the Taiwanese who ate 11 grams a day have the same rate of diabetes as people who eat 50 times more meat each day than they do, even though their rates are the same, you still want to claim that that the meat is the cause. So
Milkjar's twin brother. Again, you're putting words in my mouth. I'm not claiming anything about Luxembourg. It's ridiculous to try to equate two different countries where one, we're just looking at statistics about how many people have diabetes, whereas the other one was a controlled study. And you're just trying to conflate things that we're not making any kind of claims on. What we're saying is that even the people who ate very little meat still had higher chances of getting diabetes than the people who didn't eat meat. And that goes back to my first opening statement, which is that what I believe is that you can be really healthy eating a tiny little bit of animal products. Those people still have lower diabetes rates than the people in Luxembourg. They have lower diabetes rates than the people in the US. You can see it on the screen here. And what I'm saying is that if you cut out all the meat, you're going to have even lower rates of diabetes then. And in our next debate, I'll bring another study where we can talk about diabetes specifically. But there are some really large studies, I think over like 200,000-300,000 people, where they showed that you have like a 23 times chance of increased risk of getting diabetes with even just moderate animal protein consumption. So it's a very clear trend, and the reason why we picked this study is because it shows that trend is applicable even from like a little tiny bit down to nothing.
Okay. First of all, let's just quickly go over this. So, first of all, you believe that eating 11 grams of meat is a day will, or eating a half pound of meat per month will increase your chances of getting diabetes by 3 times?
I wouldn't claim how many times. I would just say that it does make it worse.
Well, the study says that non-vegans got that the vegetarians had 2%, and the meat eaters had 7%. So that's about a 3 times increase in your chances of getting diabetes. So
Yeah.
would
So
you agree?
I mean, yeah, that's what the study is saying. So that's why we brought it.
Okay, so you agree that it increases your chances of getting diabetes by 3 times to eat a half pound of meat a month?
If you did the averages, I didn't average it across, but yeah, if that's what it comes out to, and I trust your math, then yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's what this study showed anyway. I mean, it's not my, I'm not going to put a thing on it, but what part of that wouldn't, like, you know, I mean, I agree that I can see that you don't want to agree with the outcome of this study, but what
you're
problem
just
do you have with
repeating
it
the words.
scientifically? Like what problem do you have with it scientifically?
Oh, well, first of all, they were missing a lot of data. Second of all, this says nothing about how healthy vegans would be because there's no data on vegans.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So, what?
I was agreeing with you. I said, okay, yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, so first of all, this debate was not to discuss.
I think you might be breaking up.
Cut out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, you cut out there.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure this study does have vegans in it, doesn't it? I'm pretty sure it does.
Well, I don't know that they're vegan specifically, but they just ate so little animal products to begin with that they're close to it. Like, but I don't think they're fully vegan.
Yeah, so according to this study, you increase your chances of getting diabetes if you eat 11 grams of meat a day by a factor of 300%. Yet we have another group of people that eat 50 times more meat than they do, and they have a 0.2% higher rate of diabetes. So considering the fact that the people that participated in this study would risk losing their livelihood if their bosses found out that they did things such as smoking and drinking, and some other problems that I mentioned, and considering the fact that if eating 11 grams of meat a day really increases your chances of getting diabetes by 300%, then how come people who eat 50 times more meat have the same rate of diabetes?
Okay, so as I've said before, we're not talking about Luxembourg. There is no, like,
I'm talking about Luxembourg.
You literally just pulled out a statistic out of your butt, basically saying like that they eat this amount of meat. I don't know. You didn't send me any study. You didn't send me any information. I have no idea how much meat they eat. And also, it still doesn't prove your point, because the fact is they do eat more meat. I would be absolutely certain you're correct in that. And they do have more diabetes. So the fact that you're shocked that they only have X amount more diabetes and you're expecting them to have way more, that's not how things work. I mean, things aren't exactly totally linear. Like if you ate, twice as much, you're going to get twice as much. Like there could be a leveling off point. Like that's how things work. Like it's the same thing with cholesterol too. Like after some point of like dietary cholesterol and saturated fat intake, your blood serum cholesterol levels off. This could be the same kind of feature. We don't know, and that's not the point.
So eating 11 grams of meat a day is the same for diabetes as eating 500 grams of meat a day.
You're kind of grasping at straws here. He's talking about like a hyperbolic curve. Do you not know what a hyperbolic curve is, where it starts going up fast at first and then kind of goes up a little bit?
Yeah, and I'm saying that it's ridiculous, and combining the problems with this study that I mentioned,
that's fine. So I think we're just rehashing things at this point. So we can just move on.
You can let the audience decide. I mean, that's fine.
Guys, I'm totally here. Like I love this debate as it's going, but unfortunately I'm going to have to get going relatively soon. So I did want to kind of say a few more things.
Yeah, let's just take a look at my study real quick.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see that.
Okay.
I'm going to share my screen back. Here it is. Or no, this isn't it. Where was it? This is it. Let me blow it up a bit so you can see it better. Oh shoot, that's too much. Sorry. There we go.
All right, so go to that this table 2.
Is it this or this? This is what you want?
No, the other one.
Oh, shoot. Hold on. This thing. Okay. How do I make this bigger here? Okay. Is that okay? Do you want me to make it bigger?
Just a little more. Okay, so what's the pH of a human stomach acid?
Why don't you just tell us? Because, you know, I mean, you're the one trying to make the point here.
Well, it's the 1.5.
Yep. Okay.
And what's which other herbivore has a stomach acid even close to 1.5? And what other animals have a stomach acid of 1.5?
I mean, I think you should just make your point. I mean, here I can see there's a monkey. They have a 2.1. That's pretty close.
Mm-hmm.
But what are you trying to get at? I think you should make your point.
That no animal that is an herbivore has like a stomach acid below 3, which is like 40 times high, 40 times less acidic than our stomach acid is.
Except right here, what you said is false. Here's a beaver. Here's a beaver. They're at 1.7 and they're listed as herbivore.
Well, beavers eat meat.
It's listed as an herbivore.
Hmm.
Here's another one. Whatever this thing is, brush-tailed bettong. That's a 2.8.
Yeah, but they're hindgut fermenters,
Okay.
and we don't have hindgut fermentation.
Okay, but you just asked for herbivore. Now you're adding more like
Yeah.
things on top of it. Rabbits, 1.9.
Where's the rabbit? Yeah,
Right
hindgut. That means you have a cecum and can do hindgut fermentation. So that means the fermentation occurs in the hindgut. We don't have that ability because we don't have a hindgut.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So and also 1.7, that's about like, I think, because this is on the logarithmic scale. So 1.7 is, I think, like 5 times less acidic than 1.5.
Logan, do you know about that? Because I don't know that pH is a logarithmic scale.
It's
I zoned out for a second. I missed that. I was looking up something. Sorry.
Is logarithmic. Okay, fine. I didn't know that. It sounded kind of weird.
So 1.7 is a lot more alkaline than 1.5.
Okay.
And the only animals that reach 1.5 are scavengers, basically.
Okay, that's fine.
So no herbivore comes even close to the stomach acidity that we have.
Okay.
So could I make a point here quickly? So you're pointing out one thing out of the whole anatomy of a human and just saying the stomach acid, though. And then your Weston A. Price study is saying the teeth, though. Like, you realize there's a lot more to a human than one attribute.
Well, I'm trying to look at one attribute at a time, because if we look at everything, we can't really talk about it, because we'll be here forever. That's why we're doing specific studies on specific things.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, I could just go over, like, your entire jaw structure and how it's frugivorous in your intestines and fingers and eyesight and everything like that, and you're just saying the stomach acid. That's all I'm pointing out.
Yeah, but you can't digest. If you have a stomach acid of 1.5 and you eat fruit, because all herbivores, their digestion is based on bacteria, and a pH level of 1.5 kills all bacteria. So you can't, if you have a stomach acid of 1.5, there will be no bacteria left to ferment the food for you to digest. And to digest, the only reason to have a stomach acid of 1.5 like scavengers. Like, you know, if you look here, everyone that has a 1.5 pH is like a scavenger. It's because, you know, it's to, it can only help you digest meat. Like if you put your vegetables in that acid, all the bacteria will die and you can't ferment it. So basically everyone with 1.5 is a heavy meat eater and a scavenger. There's even scavengers with higher pHs than we have.
Yeah,
Like
I mean,
the,
I don't know how true any of this is. Like the
what?
So I don't know how true any of this is. So 1.7 is like how much of a difference? Like what is the big difference between 1.7 and 1.5 in terms of what they eat?
It's a logarithmic scale. So 1.7 is like 5 times more alkaline than 1.5.
So what do, like, say a cat, what is a cat's?
Well, this study used domesticated cats. So it's kind of hard to tell what they are in the wild. But if you look at their wild counterparts, it's about the same as us.
So it's
You mean
3.6
about
for a
same?
cat.
What is it?
3.6 for a cat.
3.6. So you're saying 1.7 to 1.5 is a big enough difference, but then we're the same as 3.6 to 1.5?
Well, those are domesticated animals that probably, for the most part, cat and dog food has a lot of grains in it. And they're eating a very poor diet. So those are the only domesticated animals that we're looking at. If you look at wild animals, it basically lines up that general carnivores and scavengers have about 1.5.
Okay,
Here's an example.
You got
look at any scavenger, obligate scavenger, 1.2.
But that's a big difference too. That's another 0.3 difference. That's even more of a difference than 0.2.
No, it's not, because the lower down you go, the less the difference gets, because it's a logarithmic scale.
Okay.
So the difference in a logarithmic scale, the difference between 0 and 1, 0 and 0.1 is like nothing, but the difference between like 2 and 2.1 is like a 10 times difference. So that's how logarithmic.
I just want to bring up. Yeah, let me bring up one point here. So we debated before, me, you, and Nick Kazmarek, right? We went over the World Health Organization study, and you dismissed that study because you said at the end.
Fireworks! I can't hear you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so when me, you, and Nick debated before, we talked about the World Health Organization study, and at the end of that study, you said, I'm dismissing this study because at the end of it, it shows results were inconclusive. So if you go down to your conclusion of this study, it says, thus, to fully understand the patterns highlighted here, more detailed on the gut microbia across stomach acidities, more data is required. So it's also saying the same exact, hold on. It's also saying the same exact thing as the World Health Organization study. So either you have to accept that the World Health Organization study is right about meat, or you're saying that this study is wrong.
That's absolutely not what I said. That's not why I dismissed the World Health Organization study. I dismissed the World Health Organization study because it said that like 1 in 500,000 people will get cancer from, like, best case scenario, according to their study. If everything in their study was right, according to them, then in the best case, then they can account for like 1 in 500,000 people like getting cancer. It might have been like 1 in a million getting cancer from red meat.
No, it was just 34,000 a year.
What?
It was like 34,000 people a year, and by you saying that that doesn't count, that's just an appeal to futility.
No, I didn't say it doesn't count. I said that if like to claim that meat causes cancer, and first of all, it said we can't really prove that meat causes cancer, but if everything we say is correct, that means 1 in 35,000 people a year. No, not one. It says 35,000 people a year die from it. And I said that 35,000 people a year is like, if that's the best case scenario they're looking at, then like to say that, you know, people need to stop eating red meat because, you know, 1 in a million people die from it each year is ridiculous. That's
okay,
all
so
I
either
said.
you're conceding that it's linked to cancer and it's an appeal to utility, or you're dismissing both studies because they're both inconclusive.
As far as this study being inconclusive, it's the part that's inconclusive isn't what the stomach acidity levels of the animals are. The part that's inconclusive is, let's see.
The role that they play. So what it means to have that stomach acidity.
Yeah. I got it highlighted on the screen.
So even the sentence above that says the pH data is very scarce. And then if you look at the top there, it says the purpose of the stomach, what the role is. So if you don't even understand what the role of having that stomach acidity is, then you can't make a conclusion saying that therefore we're carnivores.
Hold on, let me read through this whole thing.
See, I did read your studies.
Yeah, please let me read through the whole thing.
I'd like to get in one comment too when you guys are done.
Yeah, you can go next.
Okay, thanks.
Talking about the table we were looking at and all, this is talking about if the stomach acid, if the point of stomach acid is to be an ecological filter to prevent, like their hypothesis was that stomach acid is used to prevent pathogen contamination from contaminated meat that we're eating. So they hypothesized that the reason that we need such high stomach acid is to keep from eating meat. And it's saying that the data they gathered on stomach acid and such things was not able to allow them to conclude whether or not the reason we have stomach acid is to prevent us from getting sick from pathogens.
Yeah. Exactly. So all throughout history, humans, through their evolution, obviously ate insects. So you have no idea why this stomach acidity is like that.
No, the only reason I brought this up is to say that the only animals that have a stomach acid of 1.5 are basically scavengers for the most part and carnivores.
But it's inconclusive.
The only thing that's inconclusive is if the purpose of the stomach acid is to prevent us from getting sick from pathogens, which is completely has nothing to do with the point.
Okay.
The reason I submitted this study wasn't to show that we have high stomach acid to prevent us from getting pathogens. It's to show that the only animals that have a stomach acid anywhere near as acidic as ours are scavengers.
Yeah. So it's just like me going, well, there's a bunch of other frugivores that have the same fingernails as me. That's your study.
But you can't digest plants if your stomach acid is that high because it kills all the bacteria in your gut.
The bacteria is not in your stomach; it's in the intestines later.
Well, what?
The bacteria, we have bacteria in our like digestive tract. It's just not in the stomach. So you have all sorts of like healthful and helpful bacteria in your intestines.
Digestion starts in the mouth.
Yeah, but your intestines start off sterile.
What do you mean by that?
You need to keep adding bacteria. That's why people take like probiotics and try to eat food with good bacteria in it. Is because you can't keep that.
You keep saying vegetables though too. Why do you keep saying vegetables and not like fruits? Is there a reason?
Well, fruits too. I mean, you need to keep replenishing your gut microbiome.
There's actually tons of studies that show that you know that basically your gut bacteria changes for the better from adopting a whole food plant-based diet. So there's no need to get bacteria from eating meat. You could just as easily get the healthful bacteria from eating anything else, like the plants too. I mean, there's bacteria on everything. Yeah. And the only thing I wanted to point out on this is that, you know, just the very idea that their hypothesis was that the high acidity is to ward off any kind of potential, you know, pathogen that we're eating. That's actually another great reason to avoid eating meat, because so much of it is contaminated.
Well, it was inconclusive. So
no, it isn't. Yeah, it's inconclusive. But the hypothesis being that that's what, you know, one possible reason why that may be the case. And
so you just conceded your study is inconclusive.
Yeah,
and just to point that out, you just said your own study is inconclusive.
Yeah, but the point is to look at the chart that shows every single animal's stomach acid.
Yep,
and
that's
the only animal that has the same stomach acid that we do are scavengers.
Yeah. So you said in a debate before that fruit is the only food designed for humans. What did you mean by that?
No, I said that it was the only food it's the only food on Earth other than dairy whose only purpose for existing is to be eaten by mammals.
Okay.
That's what I said.
I'm pretty sure you said humans at first, and then you tried to change it later on. But I mean, I could timestamp it later.
If I said humans, that would make no sense, because the only thing that makes sense is that fruit and dairy are the only two foods on Earth whose only purpose for existing is to be eaten by mammals.
So why does the Weston A. Price Foundation say that babies shouldn't have their mother's milk and should have pureed organ meat?
What?
Because that's what the Weston A. Price Foundation says in that babies should have pureed organ meat instead of their mother's milk. Why would they say that? Just curious.
I don't know. They also say, it's fine to eat grains, which I disagree with. So I disagree with a lot of what the Weston A. Price Foundation says.
Okay, so what parts do you pick and choose to agree and disagree with?
I don't really look into what the Weston A. Price Foundation says. I just, I like Weston A. Price's work, which has nothing to do with, all the work that Weston A. Price Foundation did was after he died. So
yeah, I think he might have claimed that that's a good thing. I don't know if it's the foundation, but I'll have to look into that later. I just wondering what you thought, because that's pretty weird.
Weston A. Price recommended a diet that had a pretty large amount of plant foods.
All right.
So, I mean, I don't agree with Weston A. Price on what people should eat, and I don't agree with a lot of things the Weston A. Price Foundation says. I just used his data to show certain things he was saying.
Can I ask you what you do recommend that people like? I mean, you can do it from your own experience, what you eat, or what you think is what people should eat for like good health.
Well, based on Weston A. Price's data,
you just said you don't agree with him, so I'm asking what you think. Like, because you just said you don't agree with everything he said, so I'm asking you specifically, what do you think the evidence points to what we should be eating?
Well, I think the best study on people's diets and their effects on health was nutrition and physical degeneration, and the data in that points to the more animal foods you eat, the healthier you'll be.
But you just said Weston Price himself recommended eating lots of vegetables and fruits and whatever. You just said that. But that's the book we were talking about.
Yeah, but I'm saying the data in the study.
But you just
if you map it out, it says that the healthiest people ate the least amount of plants.
But you have a logical inconsistency with what you just said. You said that you don't agree with everything he says because he recommends people eat a large amount of fruits and vegetables. But you're saying that this book tells the opposite. But
because I'm not looking at what he says, I'm looking at what his data says.
Okay, but so like think of what you're saying. You're smarter than the guy who wrote the book. Like, and he's telling you what he thinks in the conclusion of his book. But
No.
you're claiming that it really should have been something else.
No, because he thought it was unrealistic to tell everyone to eat a raw meat diet. So he kind of tailored his recommendations to like kind of meet in the middle, and kind of his conclusion was that if you just get rid of foods of commerce and only eat traditional foods, that the results are going to be so amazing that it doesn't really matter that much if you're not eating the ultimate Eskimo diet.
Okay.
He was just trying to recommend people an easy diet that'll vastly improve their health.
Do you think that the Eskimo diet is the ultimate diet?
According to the data I've seen, yeah, because they are the only ones with absolutely zero cavities and zero disease of any kind that could have been measured at the time.
Yep, cool. So let me ask you then some follow-up questions. So I realized that in the old days, before we had industrialized, pollution, like destroying the whole world, like let's assume that what you're saying is correct. Like that is the best diet, right? Like most healthy diet there is. But unfortunately, we have to live in the world that we have, and the world that we have is extremely polluted. And because of bioaccumulation, like the most polluted diet you can have is the Eskimo diet. It's so polluted that they're told not to breastfeed their kids because the toxins from the mothers pass to the babies. And this is why like dolphins and like, other things like porpoises and stuff, they have really high rates of death among their first kid because the moms have like the bioaccumulated toxins. And you pass that through either breast milk or like direct, feeding of the kid through like the umbilical cord, and the toxins go into the babies. So they have something like a 40%, death rate on the first kid. And then once the mom has kind of detoxified all their toxins into the kid, the second kid has a better chance. And I'm not making this stuff up. You can just go watch like a TED talk on it. There's a really interesting thing. And they go and they talk about the Eskimos too, that they're literally told to not breastfeed their kids because of the same thing. They're eating so many of these animals that are really high in the food chain, like polar bears and whales and all this kind of stuff, the killer whales. They have incredibly like polluted blood. And so my question to you is then, knowing that we live in this super toxic, like really like horrendously like ruined world, like would you still think that that's a good diet?
I'd say the best thing to do is to eat herbivores to reduce that, but everything is so toxic it doesn't really matter. I mean, if
right. Like even small fish have like tons of mercury and all that stuff. So
yeah, I mean,
it's an appeal to futility, though.
There's no proof that mercury in fish has any of the toxic effects of like actual isolated mercury. Like, for example, the Japanese are one of the highest fish consuming people in the world, and they do not show any signs whatsoever of mercury toxicity.
Okay, but you would admit there's other poisons that are, right? So I mean, like bisphenol A and other kind of like endocrine disrupting chemicals and all sorts of like nasty stuff. Those do bioaccumulate in fats.
Yeah, but there's, plants are just as toxic. I mean, depending on where you get them. Everything
they may be. You're absolutely right. They may be because they might be covered in like glyphosate and all sorts of other nasty
everything depends on where you source it.
Yeah, I agree with that. But here's my point. if you're eating like something that's like a produce, like, you know, fruit, whatever, squash, potatoes, it could be covered in like chemicals. You're eating a certain amount of them and you're ingesting that amount of chemicals. But the animals that you're eating are basically eating the same stuff. And those toxins bioaccumulate. So what that means is like a cow will eat, you know, I don't know how many, you know, hundreds of pounds or thousands of pounds of stuff, whatever that is, either grass or grain, depending on how unhealthy and whatever managed, you know, they are. They will eat literally tons of this stuff. So like hundreds or potentially thousands of pounds of stuff. And then you go and eat a slice of that meat, and the fat has all of that chemical, like, you know, poison bioaccumulated in it.
Yeah, I mean, you shouldn't eat grain-fed animals that are eating grains that have been sprayed with glyphosate.
Yep, but even grass-fed.
I just want to make. I just want to say something. Can I say something quickly?
Sorry, just even grass has like toxins on it because of just how polluted the world is. So even grass-fed, you're still getting the toxins that are just in the air, in the acid rain, all the kind of crap that's being washed out and just like flowing in the water. Go ahead, Logan.
No, I mean, like the Amish farms, like they test their farms and they're basically totally clean. Like I've seen the tests from like my dairy club. They, you know, the people in my dairy club, they got the farm to run tests on their land, and it's basically no pollution in it.
I would want to see that, but anyway, I'll let Logan have fun.
Yeah, I'm just going to point out every time that CO makes an argument saying that this is unhealthy or this is unhealthy, and you go, well, plants are too, you're conceding to the fact that all those things that he named are unhealthy, and you're just making a two wrongs make a right argument.
No, I'm saying that toxins are in everything, and it depends on where you source your food for how many toxins you're eating, and that the you know, toxins like, you know, heavy metals or stuff like that, I mean, they're very bad, and they're in all industrial foods. But that's why.
So basically, his point was that the Inuit diet nowadays is healthy, unhealthy, so you can't eat it. So it's not even relevant to today. And by you saying, well, plants are, you know, sprayed with pesticides too, you're conceding the fact that the Inuit diet nowadays is unhealthy.
Yeah, the whole world is poisoned. Like you have to be careful at this point to source food that's not poisoned, regardless of what you're eating.
Okay, so if you had, I asked you this question before. I said if you had fruit trees in your backyard, you said it's not only the most ethical diet in terms of death. You said in terms of death, but you don't care about ethics. And then you said,
I absolutely did not say that. You need to stop constantly putting words in my mouth.
Okay, so
remember exactly what I said, and I said that a fruitarian diet is the only diet that could potentially not involve killing.
Okay, that was my point. But you said you don't like think about ethics or whatever, right? Like it doesn't bother you to kill an animal.
I said there's nothing wrong with killing, so I don't care. But I said fruitarian diet is the only diet that could possibly involve no killing.
Okay. So if you also had fruit trees in your backyard, it's not only good for the reason that you just named, but then also you wouldn't have toxins on your plants either. So it's basically the same thing as you saying, well, I get my stuff from a locally sourced place. So it's better for not killing, and it's just, you know, equally non-toxic if you don't spray your own plants with pesticides.
Yeah, I mean, you could eat food without toxins in it and still be very nutritionally deficient.
Yeah. Well, my point, though, is you're just appealing to futility when you say, well, all these other things are bad for you, too. And in actuality, they're not.
No, I'm not saying it's futile. I'm saying you need to be careful where you source your food, regardless of what you're eating.
Can I jump in for a second?
Yeah.
Milkjar's twin brother question. So you concede that the Eskimo diet is not what you're following, and potentially has the problems that we mentioned from the toxins, right?
Who cares what I'm following? I'm doing a lot.
What you're saying is the optimal for living in this world that we're on. Like, what's optimal for health? you're admitting that that's not optimal for health because of those problems, right?
No, I'm saying what would be optimal for health is to do your best to avoid toxins.
Okay, so would you say that, is that why you eat like cows and stuff, because you can get the grass fed and they're not like grain fed and all that stuff? Is that
Well,
fair?
no, I eat cows because I don't want to be nutritionally deficient.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. But I'm saying like versus why you don't eat like, say, killer whale, or why you don't eat like, I don't know, polar bears.
I mean, I'm careful of where I source my food. Like I won't eat any fish from the Pacific Ocean because of the radiation from Fukushima, but I'll still eat fish from the Atlantic Ocean. And I don't know how polluted, the Arctic Sea is in terms of like, the Eskimos and what they're eating. And I don't know about that, but if it was really polluted, I wouldn't eat what was there either. I think it's very difficult to avoid all toxins on this earth. And there's, it's going to be hard no matter what you're eating. I recommend going to Siberia if you want to have a toxin-free diet.
Okay. All right, cool. So my next point is this. I went and looked up like a crap ton of info on kind of like farming grass-fed animals and cows in particular. And what I found on a bunch of different like sites and government information and farmer forums and all this kind of stuff is that for about a 1,200-pound steer, you get about a 740-pound carcass. From that, you get about 490 pounds of meat. Stop me if you don't agree with any of this so far. And then I looked up, for a half a pound of beef, you get about 400 calories. It's 405 according to the info I found online. So 490 pounds is about just under 400,000 calories. It's 396,000 calories. So that would break down that you would have, if you divide that by 365 days in a year, it would break down to just under 1,100 calories per day. Now that's obviously not enough for people. You need a minimum of 2, but if you're really active, because you're like, doing all this stuff, taking care of your animals and whatever, you probably need 3 times that. But let's just, for the sake of argument, say you need 2,000 calories. That means you need 2 cows. Okay, so you need 2 cows per year just to get your calories. What I found is that on the low end of what people say you need about 1.5 acres of land to pasture feed a cow if you're not going to feed it any grain. The upper kind of reasonable range was 2, so 1.5 to 2, and some sources said it was much higher, like 4 if it's a drier area. But if you just assume that you need 2, which I think is a reasonable number from everything I've seen, that means for 2 cows, you need 4 acres of land. Now, if you've got a family of 4, that means you need 16 acres of land.
Because every place has a different amount it produces. Like,
right.
For example, there's places in Hawaii where the grass is like up to your it's like past your waist, and they can have like 8 cows on an acre because.
Okay, that's fine. But Hawaii's really small, right? So let's not forget that.
It depends on. I'm just saying Hawaii because there's just one farm that I've seen, not in person but on the internet, and it showed their grass, and it was like grass past their waist, and that's just like one example I've seen where they've had 8 cows or 10 cows on an acre, and there were places like I went to the farms I go to in New York. I see their grass in the summer, and it's almost not even halfway up to my shin. And then you could I've been in Amish country in Pennsylvania where the grass was up to my knees. And there's also a lot of different stuff that a lot of farmers, most commercial grass-fed farmers, they don't do rotational grazing. So they'll just leave their cow on the grass. But if you do rotational grazing, you can increase yield by 4 times, because what rotational grazing does.
You're breaking up there. I think we're losing.
Grass on the piece of land, and there'll be nothing but dirt left. But if you keep cows on a patch of grass until it eats it down to the shoots where there's still a shoot sticking out, and move it, that it's you're basically like let's take you take a 30-year-old and they're growing at a certain rate. Like what happens is if you only eat the grass down to the shoot, you're basically reverting it. You're basically, it's like turning back the clock and making it into like a prepubescent, and then it like hits puberty and has a growth spurt. So like every time that the cow eats it down to the shoots and you take it off the land, it like has like massive like puberty type growth, rather than like, you know, just letting it eat all the dirt and like fucking like turning your yield into like a quarter of what it should be.
Okay, but listen, so this is what you were kind of getting at with the foot soldier debate. You said that the farm you went to in upstate New York, that they had, you know, a couple hundred cows, a couple hundred acres. You know, even at the very low end of the scale that I've seen, people say like a minimum of 1.5 acres. And I just used 2 because some people said 4. And so I was even being generous. But what I'm saying is that, you know, just for yourself, you're going to need to have 4 acres of land just to give you the cows you need. You mentioned before that you want to, you know, eventually your goal is to basically, I'm assuming, save money and like buy land somewhere and like go there and live in the lifestyle that you think is the healthiest for you and that you find optimal. What I'm saying is you need probably, I mean, if you're going to live by yourself, you're going to need at least 4 acres. If you're going to live with a family of 4, and you mentioned that you didn't want to be alone, you're going to need 16 acres. And compare that. I got a really great example. I'll put the link in your Twitter thing here. This is a family of 4. They have a 1/10 of an acre. They're just outside of downtown Los Angeles. They grow 6,000 pounds of food per year on that 1/10 of an acre. They eat 90% of their food from the stuff they grow. They're not vegans. They're vegetarians. They keep goats and chickens and ducks. They eat the eggs and they drink the milk, but they don't eat the animals. Their soil is like more and more fertile every year. They have like no chemicals, no pesticides, herbicides. They use like permaculture principles to keep stuff like companion plantings, you know, so that they don't need like chemicals and stuff like that. They're able to sell all the food they don't eat for $20,000 a year. So that's like their main source of income. And they basically, here's what they make. They have 400 species of plants, 4,300 pounds of vegetable food, 900 chicken, 1,000 duck eggs, 25 pounds of honey, and then they have seasonal fruits throughout the year. I'm going to send you this link, but they have a great
point. I don't get the point of it.
So my point is that the larger the animals that you eat, the more space and requirements that they have, like as far as you know, the environment goes. And if you
hold on, there's a very important thing you left out in your whole, you know, how much meat a cow produces. I mean, you're leaving out the fact that a cow like produces like 10 gallons of milk a day.
Okay.
So like, how many calories is that?
Okay, so let's cut it in half then. Let's say you're getting half your calories from the milk. I don't know if that's reasonable, but I'll just give it to you.
A lot more than half, like 10 gallons. Like, how many cows?
First of all, that's not accurate. I think most cows produce about 7 gallons of milk a day. But like,
all right, say 7. How many calories in a gallon of milk?
Are you saying that you can drink 7 gallons of milk in a day?
I could make butter, and I mean.
Okay, great. So this is what I'm saying. Look up the calories. Let's say.
Hold on, you're not letting me finish. There's like a lot you can do with the milk. You can like feed it to. You can like feed it to. You can like take the milk. You know, make a couple pounds of butter out of it a day. I could eat a pound of butter a day easily.
Okay.
You could.
Okay, so let's say you only need 1 cow. I'll give it to you. You only need 1 cow.
And then you could feed that to pigs, so you get more meat out of that. So like, none of that 7 gallons of milk would go to waste. You use all that to make more calories.
Okay, great. So what I'm saying is you still need the 2 acres of land for the 1 cow.
That's nothing.
Okay, that's nothing. But what I'm saying is you can do 1/10 of an acre and be vegetarian. And you can even be less than that for vegan.
So what?
So my point is that, like we said, we have to live on the world we have. You can't do the Inuit diet because it's like full of chemicals and toxins, and you want to do the grass-fed meat, but that unfortunately doesn't have enough land for all the people that live on Earth.
No, I disagree with that. If you look at Joel Saladin's farms,
Yeah, he imports a lot of grain to feed his chickens and ducks. I know about him. I've done a lot of research on him.
He doesn't import it. It comes, all the grains he gets are from local farms.
Exactly, but it's not on his thing. So if you look at it as a system, it's not his closed system.
Well, it's his community.
It's his community, but it's not a closed system. And what he tries to do is try to make claims based on like regenerative practices as if it was his system, but it's not.
Yeah. You also just involved a pig, which takes up even more room now. Now you got a pig there you got to feed too. How much room does that pig take up? You're adding more things. I'm just saying that's more space now. Also, you claimed you don't even eat pigs.
I eat pigs.
You said you only eat 1 cow a year and a couple goats in the last live stream.
I eat pigs too. But like I don't.
Okay, so I mean, it just seems kind of dishonest when you make the argument saying I only eat 1 cow and a couple goats. Now there's pigs. I notice you're eating rabbits. There's all these other things involved. It just seems like a couple of your arguments don't make sense.
No, like I eat like a pound of meat a day. That's about 365 pounds of meat a year. 1 cow could provide what's it called? If you're saying it's like 400 pounds of meat from 1 cow, that'll feed me for more than a year.
Sounds like you're really against animal agriculture too, with all this environment talk. It sounds like you really care about the environment.
No, I mean, like the Maasai do animal agriculture and they have no negative impact on their environment.
Okay, so all other people should stop buying from animal agriculture. That's what Milkjar says.
So I don't really care.
Oh, you don't care now, but you do care about the environment. See, that's contradictory. You can't claim that you care and then say I don't care.
No, I care about the environment, so I want everyone to die.
Okay, so wow, I mean, that's obviously not going to happen. You're being like you're saying something that will never happen unless you couldn't even do that yourself.
What do you mean it might never happen? If we get like 100 years ago, there was a Carrington event. It took out all the electricity on Earth because of the solar flare coming from the sun. Like if that happened today, billions of people would die.
Appeal to possibility again, another fallacy. So, I mean, if you care about the environment, you're obviously against animal agriculture as a whole, especially when your only argument is that, well, the Maasai do it properly.
No, I'm not against animal agriculture. I'm against anything that, requires things like nuclear energy to exist.
But you said you care about the environment. So, you're not making any sense.
How am I not making any sense? I care about the environment, so I hope everyone dies.
Well, if you're just saying that you care about the environment, and then you're just saying, well, only if it has to do with nuclear power, that's contradictory.
No, I hope everything in civilization goes away.
Okay. Well, I mean, I gotta go soon. I don't know if how long you guys want.
Yeah, guys, I'm already really, really late, so I'd love to continue this. I just want to say thanks to both of you. I think it's been really fun. Hopefully, it's been entertaining.
Yeah.
I would want to do another one, and we can go over some more studies like the mummies and some other stuff. I think maybe just do like a 2-round, 2-sentence like summary. Maybe go around and then just end it here. That's what I'd say. Is that cool?
Yeah, you want to start?
Yeah, sure. So, my summary is kind of what I opened with. I think people can not only be, healthy, but I think they can be healthier by avoiding all animal products. They can just eat plants. It's better for the environment, better for your health. And, the science that I've seen shows that even the little bits that people eat in the longest lived, studies, I think they would probably have lived longer if they avoided those two.
Okay, so I'd like to say that you were given opportunities to provide studies that proved and gave data in regards to the purported fact that veganism is a healthier diet than or can be a healthier diet than one that includes animal products. You provided absolutely zero data of any people that live without eating animal products. You can't prove that those that do not eat animal products can be healthier than those that do, while providing absolutely zero data on those who do eat, by providing zero data on people that eat a vegan diet. So, I mean, that's an admission of a failure right away, just to start. I never claimed that you can't be healthy on a vegetarian diet. It's not optimal, but I think it's quite possible, as Weston A. Price's work has shown. You could eat little meat and still be extremely healthy compared to what we see in today's world. Yeah, and Weston A. Price clearly showed, I mean, you said that, you know, he didn't have data on things such as heart disease because he simply couldn't get it. But I think that based on the data that he was able to gather, it showed a very clear progression in terms of the primitive people who ate the least amount of meat being least healthy, to those eating the most amount of meat being most healthy. Everyone ate meat that was healthy. The only people that weren't healthy, the only people that didn't eat meat in the entire study were not healthy. Yeah, just a very clear progression. As you add points of data, you get to eliminate variables until you're down to one variable, which is how much meat did each group of people eat.
Perfect. Logan?
Can I just say something quickly? So, yeah, I don't want a big closing statement or anything. People could kind of see like how the debate went and just judge for themselves. Just to be clear, like I told Milkjar to bring a partner, and he said he didn't want to. I said, well, you know, it's going to be 2 versus 2, and that'll be more fair. And he said, I'd rather work alone, just so people know. And just to be clear too, like the only reason why I think you wanted this debate is because CO made a really good debunking video against Sparenge and like totally wrecked him. And I think you felt the need to like try to stick up for him. I don't think it went very well. You're kind of interrupting my closing statement here. But then, yeah, so I said, Meteor Man, you should join Milkjar. You kind of refused that. So that's probably going to be the next debate, is me against Meteor Man. So stay tuned for that, people. And yeah, that's it for me.
No, the reason I never watched Sparenge video, the reason I wanted to do one with Conscientious Omnivore was just because I saw one of his debates, and yeah, I just said, why not? I saw that he wasn't being hysterical like most others I've seen, so I thought, why not, you know, talk to a vegan who isn't hysterical?
Well, I'm glad I could do that for you. It was pleasant. I got
Where's Sparenge at? Where's Sparenge at? Why is he hiding from all these debates? Is he in a hole
America.
somewhere? Ducking? He's ducking.
America.
He doesn't want this heat. All right. Well, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks, man. It's been a lot of fun. I hope we can do it again. And yeah, for anybody who's watching, I appreciate it. And I'll try and catch up with comments and stuff too. So yeah, see you guys.
You want to do the mummies, or
yeah, we can talk about that next week. Sure.
Or the Maasai and Eskimos being sick.
Sure. Yep.
Do that.
Yeah, cool, man.
And health expectancies.
Yep. Yeah, we'll do it. Cool, man.
All right.
See you. Have a good night. Cheers, man. Bye.
Cheers.